I'm not sure.
I think it is recording. Because on my screen for your screen, it's like well, now it's not, but oh yeah, now it is. It's like a red dot flashing at the
Yeah,
top.
there's a red dot, and I'm not seeing the red dot on my computer.
It's on mine, sir.
It's
But
on mine
okay,
as
so
well.
you guys see it. Good
I think
enough.
it is recording, yeah.
All right, so let me get this thing back to where it belongs. There we go. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to this program tonight, coming to you from the University of Mount Olive, a short distance from Raleigh, North Carolina. You're witnessing a presentation by a team of MBA students who has done a great job of looking into DEERE and Company, often called John Deere. This team is going to do a strategic assessment of DEERE, which I think you will all find to be fascinating. I'd especially like to recognize the work of the team's team leader, Meredith Beam, and I'm going to turn the meeting over to her to introduce her colleagues and serve as the MC to guide us through the rest of this presentation. Meredith?
Okay, well, thanks everyone for joining us tonight. And we have a very, very high level, concise presentation for our strategic analysis on John Deere. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Meredith Beam, and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm a registered nurse. And I'm going to let my other team members introduce themselves very quickly, and then we'll get started with Morgan, starting us out with the history of John Deere. Tyler?
Okay, I'm Tyler Crawford, and I'm right up the road from UMO in Goldsboro, North Carolina.
I'm Morgan Howard, and I am from Deep Run, so I'm about 40 minutes from Mount Olive College, or UMO now, sorry.
I'm Eric.
Oh, sorry. My name's Nancy Ritz, and I live in Wilmington, North Carolina.
I'm Eric Semler. I'm in Goldsboro, North Carolina as well, and I teach high school EMT out at Onslow Southwest High School.
Okay, so who's first?
So I'll get started with the next slide. Okay, so Deere's company mission statement is that they are committed to serving those linked to the land, helping improve living standards for people everywhere. We'll go on. These are kind of quick. So Deere's core values, integrity, quality, commitment, and innovation define and unite Deere as a company and also differentiate them from their competitors. A little bit of history. The company was founded in 1837 by a blacksmith named John Deere. Deere developed the first commercially successful steel plow of its kind. He devised 10 improved plows the following year and then 40 more the year after that. In 1918, Deere purchased Waterloo Boy tractors, and this really put them on the map. After a couple of rough years, Deere launched the Model D, which was the first two-cylinder Waterloo-built tractor to bear the iconic John Deere name. In 1868, Deere and his partners incorporated, founding Deere and Company. And since then, the expansion has been enormous and strategic through the 19th and 20th century. And as of May 2017, Deere and Company has a net worth of almost $35 billion. Deere is an American corporation headquartered in Moline, Illinois, that operates in the heavy equipment industry. Sam Allen is the current CEO, and he served as CEO since 2009. Deere employs roughly 56,000 employees and has a presence in over 30 countries. A little bit about joint ventures and acquisitions. So Timberjack is a very important acquisition by Deere. They produce world-leading forestry equipment, and this acquisition gave Deere the technology and knowledge to produce high-quality forestry equipment, and it became the third product division of Deere. The Timberjack brand no longer exists by name, but its advancements are incorporated into Deere's forestry equipment line. Moving on to Lesco. Lesco was a leading supplier of lawn care, landscape, golf course, and pest control products. This acquisition doubled the number of John Deere landscape store locations and strengthened Deere's brand in the landscaping and lawn care industry, or that segment. Plastro, it was an Israeli-based irrigation company, and this acquisition established Deere as the third agricultural largest irrigation company in the world. Monosim was a European market leader in precision planters, and this acquisition accelerated Deere's market reach in precision planting equipment and also added engineering expertise to further develop planting technology. The purchase included the company's 4 facilities in France and 2 in the United States. Hagie Manufacturing is, they were the U.S. market leader in high clearance sprayers. Deere and Hagie entered a joint venture in March of 2016 where Deere purchased the majority of the ownership, 80%. And the joint venture allowed Deere to provide a broader range of sprayer options and integrate Deere's precision technology into the Hagie equipment. Some more recent acquisitions, Blue River Technology and the Verton Group. So it's spelled Werton, but I've been told it's pronounced Verton. So I hope I'm saying that right. And Blue River Technology, very recent, this year, they pioneered the application of computer vision and machine learning technology to optimize agricultural practices. And so these machine learning technologies will eventually be able to be applied to a wide range of Deere's products. And this deal complements Deere's growth plans in their goal to be aggressive in the precision ag market. The Verton Group is a German company and leading manufacturer of road construction equipment. Deere purchased the Verton Group for $5.2 billion. And so far, this acquisition has been Deere's biggest deal because it offers a complementary product line helping expand and strengthen Deere's construction and forestry segment. The acquisition of the Verton Group, I'm almost done. The acquisition of the Verton Group aligns with Deere's long-term strategy to expand in both John Deere's global growth businesses of ag and construction. And this deal provides an opportunity to leverage the capabilities of Deere's integrated enterprises also. Okay.
So when we get to strategy, I imagine we're going to hear about these again.
Yeah, we'll hear more about Meredith will provide some more insight on these too.
Yeah, when we look at the Verton Group, one thinks of related diversification. It's a diversification like some of Deere's other acquisitions into new product lines have been. But here we see Deere moving away from agriculture and the more conventional kinds of construction equipment that it's been in. So it's a diversification, but the kind that usually works well, related diversification.
Okay, so products and services that John Deere offers are agricultural equipment, construction equipment, forestry equipment, as well as engines and drivetrains, precision ag technology, and financial services to customers. So other products for resale, John Deere also offers landscape and water management services by purchasing products from other manufacturers for resale. So John Deere Landscape Division, they distribute irrigation equipment, nursery products, landscape supplies, which include seed, fertilizer, hardscape materials, and things of that nature. John Deere Water Division distribute precision ag irrigation equipment and supplies. And a main thing is pivots. They've recently gotten into pivots for farmland, and one company that they specifically deal with is Lindsay Irrigation. So I'm sure a lot of you riding through Eastern North Carolina will see the pivots in fields, and so some of those might be those. Agricultural products they make anything from row crop tractors to harvesting equipment, 4-wheel drive, and anything from 20 horsepower to 620 horsepower. Loaders, I won't spend long on this slide, but your application equipment is your sprayers, Harvesting equipment would be like your combines, your cotton pickers, seeding planters, and then precision ag technology would be the things that the computers and such that go along and are integrated into the equipment. The construction equipment, here you can see if you picture those also, excavators, dozers, backhoes, loaders, skid steers, motor graders, dump trucks, scrapers. The forestry equipment, skidders, feller bunchers, forwarders, harvesters, swing machines, knuckle boom loaders. There are also some picture there so you can get an idea of what some of those look like. Engines and drivetrains. John Deere is leading the way in off-highway engines and drivetrains. So this is a segment they're also venturing into and trying to ramp up their market share. Precision ag technology. So the precision ag technology that Deere offers is data management, remote management, guidance, variable rate application, and field and water management. As far as data management goes, this helps improve application rates, fuel economy, input placement, and land management. Remote management gives you the capability to run your operation from your office or on the go. JD Link is John Deere's proprietary software, and you can actually look on your computer and see your equipment, whether it's in the field being run or if it's sitting under a shelter. You can see the amount of hours that are on that piece of equipment. You can actually see planter speed whenever they were planting a crop. So it's a very nice software. Guidance, auto track, hands-free guidance. Eric will talk more about that, but basically you put on auto track and then don't touch anything until you get to the end of the road to have to turn around. Variable rate application. This allows you to only put seed and chemicals down where it's needed. So this helps cut costs on inputs. Field and water management. Automated water and field management allows for reduced irrigation costs and save money and time on labor and fuel. Financial services. So Deere provides financial services to its customers in the ways of equipment loans, equipment leasing programs, credit lines, and then there's a couple different financing plans there, and we will also talk more about that in detail. For just a preface, what we'll discuss later, the net sales and revenues in 2016 for Deere were $26 billion, and net income was at $1.5 billion with roughly an 8% operating margin. Net sales by segment, ag and turf sales were $18.5 billion, and construction and forestry were just under $5 billion.
I guess that distinguishes the difference between those two groups, huh?
Yes, it definitely shows it definitely distinguishes how, and we'll talk later when we get to the BCG matrix, but it really shows that ag and turf is a star, and construction and forestry are trying to move in that direction. So just here to show Abel's model. So who are the customers of the organization? Farmers, equipment dealers, golf courses, landscape and maintenance contractors, all are served under the ag and turf industry segment. And then construction contractors, logging contractors, those are all served under the construction and forestry industry. And as far as the financing segment goes, the financing is offered to every segment. So,
sure, that's a good quote over on the right.
Yeah, that's basically what Deere says. Those are the people. Those are their customer base.
Okay.
Linked to the land. So how can the organization meet its customer needs? In order to satisfy the needs of customers, Deere must have an efficient cost structure through manufacturing and supply. They must be customer focused as it relates to product development. They must produce and supply quality products and services, support standards for a sustainable environment, and they must develop and retain global talent.
These look like competences rather than meeting customer needs. Did I miss something here? No?
Well, I mean, I guess, their needs are, the competencies are next, actually.
Yeah. If we go back to that served market, the question is, what is it that those market segments want that if DEERE provides or meets those needs or those wants better than rivals, they'll be able to achieve competitive advantage. I'm thinking of such things as durability, power, innovations such as GPS systems and the like. I think, when you say efficient cost structure, that could translate into favorable pricing, but of course, we know that DEERE doesn't try to compete on the basis of low price. Their equipment's pretty expensive. So as we look at these needs, and particularly the phrase that Abel used is unmet needs, they're often the same needs that everybody tries to satisfy with their basic business model. But what Abel encouraged us to do was to figure out what needs that maybe the customer didn't even know they have, like when Steve Jobs figured out that we wanted mobile music and eventually came up with the iPod. Most needs are the basic characteristics of products or services, but management decides that the industry is just not meeting those needs adequately, and that they're unmet and can be met better. And when they are met better, whoever meets them better has competitive advantage. I think that DEERE, frankly, my understanding of DEERE is that it really does achieve more than quality products, but really, superior products technologically. So I'm not sure that I get the full message from this slide.
Okay. Okay, moving on to the techniques or competencies the organization uses to meet customer needs.
Right.
Their global perspective, they are customer focused and they think strategically. So DEERE works globally to develop relationships and negotiate across multiple cultures. They shape solutions for customers to fit their needs and wants, and they continually innovate in order to maximize efficiency and productivity.
Yeah, what kind of competences do you think other kinds of specific competences would be required to meet those needs, such as very durable machinery? You talked about variable planting, planting seeds at variable depths, depending upon what signals they're getting from the GPS system. You get some ideas about what kind of technical competencies would be required to meet these needs. Do any things come to mind right away? Anybody?
Go ahead, Eric.
I've got we get into the industry itself. The foraging, stamping, bending, forming of metals, metallurgy, is very important as well. And then welding and assembly. John Deere has a almost all electrical manufacturing system.
Yeah, there we go.
That deals with the ability to replicate quality and have real-time data on their manufacturing floor, so they're able to see what their productivity is, what their error rate is, and they're able to almost instantaneously step in and fix any type of issues.
Yeah, well, I think in some of our team meetings, I may have mentioned that this kind of machinery tries to tear itself apart by going over rough terrain and bumps and hitting rocks and what have you. As this machine, these machines, whether they're construction machines especially, I think I've mentioned to you that I've been in that industry pretty heavily. But also agriculture. And when you see these machines operate in the field, you just see them just trying to tear themselves apart. So the metallurgy that Eric mentioned is a big item. This steel, this plate steel that these things are made of, has to be strong enough to hold together. And as Eric mentioned, a very good point is welding. But at the same time, the steel has to be ductile enough that it can bend, that it can absorb some of these shocks. So metallurgy is a big deal. And then, as Morgan pointed out, the machines today have to have a whole lot of new software, and for that matter, computing hardware, right, that links up with the satellite systems and so forth. Another kind of technology or competence that just strikes my mind as I look at this term competences is design engineering. To be able to design these new products, whether they're construction or forestry or agriculture machinery, as well as to design the manufacturing process. You know, it takes some real sophistication to put this kind of machinery together. So I think it's these specific kinds of competences that we're looking for when we talk about Abel's model.
Okay. So these are Deere's main competitors: AGCO, Case New Holland, Kubota, Caterpillar, and we'll get into these later also, but I just wanted to name those briefly.
Okay.
So the global markets, as far as markets, these are the global markets that Deere competes in. And now I'm going to let Nancy take it away with the economic section.
All right. Well, good evening. This is Nancy. This first slide here is the economics. This is the net sales in major markets for John Deere from 2007 to 2015. And the big takeaways here, well, I'll tell you a little bit about the markets themselves. U.S., Canada, self-explanatory. But Western Europe are countries like Belgium, France, Ireland, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, UK, Spain, and Portugal. Then we have Central Europe and the CIS, which is the Commonwealth of Independent States. And that's an association of former Soviet republics and includes Russia and the Ukraine. But anyway, if you can see there from the numbers, you can see that 2012 through 2014 were very good years for John Deere in all their markets. And then it starts to taper down. Oh, I'm sorry, you have 2016 also on your chart there. And then you can see there's this drop in sales starting with 2015. Actually in all markets, except for a couple, and it was just a small uptick. But U.S. by far is their biggest market, and it's fairly constant in sales with fluctuations, of course. Next would be Western Europe, and then Canada, Latin America, followed up by Asia, and etc.
I'm struck by, Nancy, by what's been going on in the last couple of years. We see actually starting there in 2013 in the U.S. we've got $19 billion, and last year $12.5 billion. So looks like things have been sort of softening. The total runs from about 35 billion down to 23.5 billion. So some pretty significant declines going on there.
There are, and we'll see in subsequent slides. It seems to be a little bit of a mixed bag of U.S. Growth and why that might be. So on the next slide, we have two pie charts, and it's really the same figures, just a little bit of a different perspective. It's showing that the sales have been pretty much steady in terms of markets. You could see that the majority of it is the United States, and then followed, of course, by Western Europe and Canada. And that stayed pretty constant for the last couple of years, which is why I did this slide. On the next slide, we have the countries with the greatest amount of arable land. And arable land is really the amount of available land suitable for agricultural production. And this graph shows the countries exactly where John Deere does business and actually where it can expand. What we could take away from this slide clearly is that the top four there, India, the US, Russia, and China, have the greatest amount of arable land, but not a percentage of their total land. You could see there on that last column. And something else kind of interesting that I stumbled upon today actually is today, December, what are we on? December 5th, right? It's
Yes.
actually United Nations World Soil Day. And the United Nations actually has this research day every year, and they have come out and said through some UN research that in 60 years we are going to run out of arable soil worldwide if we don't change our methods. And part of the problem actually is John Deere's problem, is that the way we are plowing the land is disrupting certain microbes in the soil that is not enabling the land to renew itself and make it more arable. So that has some implications down the line.
And by the way, what has been our traditional way of dealing with that problem? Chemicals, right?
Oh yeah, let's spray it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
agricultural chemicals, of course, Monsanto, Syngenta, now DuPont and Dow, which recently merged, have become major players in agricultural chemicals and genetically modified seeds, right?
Yes.
And so as the quality of the land deteriorates, we've tried to find technological ways to solve the problem. But I think you've just put your finger on a very significant issue, and it's one that eventually DEERE and its rivals, its competitors in the industry, are going to have to come to grips with, because of course we don't have a problem of fewer mouths to feed, do we? We've got a problem of more mouths to feed, and where we have the biggest problem of more mouths to feed is where the quality of agriculture is the least well developed. So it's a really important problem, and I'm very pleased that you mentioned that, Nancy.
Yeah.
I'm also pretty impressed by this exhibit for one other reason, and it's not because it's a surprise to me, but I think it's a surprise to most people to find out that the largest market insofar as arable land is concerned is India. Most people would not name India as the biggest potential market, but there it is looking at us.
Yeah, it is interesting as well. Yes. Okay, so this slide is really just more of what is to come. What I've done is I've taken 4 specific countries for various strategic reasons and pulled these various economic indicators that we'll see on the next several slides. Yes, and so this first one is all the United States. And I'm going to start in the upper left-hand corner, which is the GDP as a percent change. And basically what we want to take away from here is that an increase in percent change is actually an increase in the volume of production. And then over the time series that we see here, fluctuations are really because of uneven growth and for other economic environmental conditions. So clearly in the recession years, 2008, 2009, it plummeted and then it went up, and then those are probably pretty normal fluctuations. And then you can see that it kind of levels out. It's predicted to level out. The bottom left-hand corner, the GDP per capita in the United States. And this is really consumption potential.
Right.
It's a measure of the output of the United States, and it takes GDP and divides it by the number of people in the country. That's what really the graph is showing you there. And it's useful when we compare one country to another, which we'll do here in a few minutes. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. In the upper right-hand corner, we do GDP per capita with purchasing power parity, and that's really leveling the playing field so we can get more of an even and accurate comparison across countries. So we have the line there, it's sort of our baseline, the United States. And in the bottom right-hand corner is really the population growth of the U.S. That we'll overlay here in a moment as well.
Okay. Oh, you're going to overlay these later?
I do it.
Excellent. That's excellent. That I was concerned, but if you're going to overlay these, that's going to be very informative. Very good.
Okay. So I also show inflation rates there. We've got our unemployment rate. We are actually at record lows, pretty much. 4% is considered a healthy, very healthy economy. And the 7 to 10 year effective yield interest rates is what the bottom graph is. And that is from Bank of America Merrill Lynch numbers there.
Yeah, what does that trend in interest rates tell us as far as what DEERE is concerned?
As far as, so interest rates are low, so they can borrow and borrow more easily, make easier acquisition.
Yeah, makes it easier for the farmers and the contractors to buy the equipment, and it also makes it easier for the dealers to acquire the equipment that it's going to be floor planned, that's going to go into inventory before the farmers and the contractors show up to buy it, right?
Right, yes.
So when we've got low interest rates, that makes everybody happy.
Yes.
Except the bank.
Except the bank, yes. But they are incrementally supposed to go up. We have a new Fed chair, so we don't know what's going to happen next 2 quarters.
Okay. Well, the rates have already started up.
Yeah. Okay, so I did the European Union, all of the European Union countries. We have similar numbers to the United States in terms of GDP as a percent change, those normal fluctuations. And of course, during the recession years, we show the volume in terms of US dollar there, which is lower than the United States, as well as their purchasing power parity up in the right-hand corner is lower than that of the United States. And their population growth is similar to the United States in that it's flattening out. It's not growing as rapidly as we'll see in the next 2 countries.
Right, and our longer-term outlook for population in Europe, particularly some parts of Europe, Eastern Europe is what I have in mind. But the growth rate of population in developed countries, even the U.S., if it weren't for immigration, our population wouldn't be growing. And in the case of Europe, Russia, by way of example, we've got a fertility rate that's down around 1.6, and Eastern European, such as Ukraine, for instance, Romania, is long story short, in the long-term future, there may not be as many mouths to feed in Eastern Europe, unlike Africa and Asia.
Right, yes. Okay. We have the unemployment rate there on top. It's about 7.5% currently. From September to August, it didn't change very much from year. They had a high of 11%, in 2013, and a record low in 2008 of 6.8%. The bottom graph actually shows the United States euro foreign exchange rate, and this is going to be flipped from the next 2 exchange rates countries that I'll show you, but this is the amount of dollars actually to purchase euros, because the euro is worth more than the US dollar right now. So as we see here, sorry, it's hard to see on my paper and all the faces are in the way. It shows how many US dollars currently to buy 1 euro.
Right.
Yes, and I can't see that.
Okay, so as that goes down, it means that the dollar strengthens. It doesn't take as many dollars to buy a euro. And that's just sort of done a little reversal. And as Nancy points out, all the exchange rate charts that we see subsequently are going to have a reverse pattern, because we're going to be talking about how much of the foreign currency is required to buy a dollar. And you want to keep that in mind, because you'll definitely see a change in the pattern here, right, Nancy?
Yes, we will. And it's important to keep in mind is that the stronger the dollar is, the more expensive John Deere products are. So
in other countries.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Another point about that is that as the dollar strengthens, as soon as and maybe we should be looking at another country when we have this conversation, but let's say that the dollar is strengthening and it takes more Chinese yuan to buy a dollar. Then what you want to do if you're making profits, if you're selling machines in China or India, just about any other country, and the number of currency units in that country required to buy a dollar is going up, then the treasurer, the financial officers of DEERE or any other company like this, want to convert those foreign currency units into dollars just as quick as they can, because the longer they wait, the fewer dollars they can buy. On the other hand, we've had a recent reversal of that trend. So now it takes, we'll see, and you might want to keep an eye out for this, we'll see that in recent, just the last year, sometimes year and a half, it takes fewer foreign currency units to buy a dollar. And so one of the questions that you have is it wise for DEERE to hold on to those currency units, to keep them over there? Because the longer they wait, the more dollars they'll be able to buy. And that has an implication for some of what you're hearing about in the news today. And but that's a political issue, so I won't get into it.
Yes. Okay, so this slide is just a quick slide to show that with the compound annual growth rate, the developed countries are actually shrinking and not growing as fast as the developing countries. The compound annual growth rate is really the growth rate of an investment over a specified amount of time, longer than 1 year. So our developed economies have always accounted for a larger share of GDP. While developed countries have always accounted for a larger share of GDP, their growth is slowing significantly relative to that of developing economies. So what I've done next is I've selected 2 countries in particular. I'm going to do China first, and I'll do India second, to overlay with the United States. And that's in part because the top producers in wheat includes China. The top producers in cotton include both India and China. In sugar, we have India up top. And rice, we have China and India again. So they're big producers.
I don't think I've kept up with you, Nancy. From this slide, we're going to the overlays of China and the U.S. Is that where you want to be? You're mentioning commodity prices.
Yeah.
Are we on the right slide or the wrong slide here?
We are, yes. I was just providing some justification.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Pardon me.
India, yes. Because they're top producers in certain crops.
Okay.
Okay. So so again, I've overlaid China there. That's there in red, and we've got the United States in the blue for the same economic indicators I presented earlier. So again, if we're looking at GDP as a percent change, this is all volume. China surpasses that of the United States, but you have to remember population is figured in there, as well as GDP per capita. And you can see actually in about, it was 2013, China surpassed that of the United States. However, when we look at purchasing power parity up in the right-hand corner, we could see that the United States is still a wealthier nation in purchasing power than in China. However, China certainly is outpacing the United States in population growth.
Okay. Nancy, you want to check your GDP per capita chart.
Okay.
The chart that I'm looking at in the lower left-hand corner there looks very much like GDP purchasing power parity, and not per capita. Per capita, as you pointed out in the upper right-hand chart, leaves China behind the U.S. But what mystifies me is that you've got pretty much the right size of number for on the y-axis. But when we compare GDP on a purchasing power parity basis rather than GDP at current prices adjusted by the bank exchange rate, we get two different pictures. And the picture we get at purchasing power parity is that China catches up with the US and surpasses it. Frankly, that happened in the fourth quarter of 2013. But you get a picture that looks like this, where China catches up with the US and then surpasses it. Its entire economy does. So the value of China's economy, when we use comparable currency, purchasing power parity adjusted currency, China's economy is bigger than the U.S. economy. The U.S. economy today is valued, give or take, at about $20 trillion. So we've got a little problem with the y-axis here, but as I say, the picture is right. China catches up with and surpasses the U.S. And the reason we do the analysis this way is because then we show, oh, but when we use purchasing power parity and divide those economies by the population, we see that the consumption potential, the spending power of people in China, because there are so many of them, is on the average a lot lower than the US. So we get two completely different pictures. We, from the perspective of the aggregate size of the economy, China is now the world's 10,000-pound gorilla. That's very often just a rude awakening for a lot of Americans. Americans aren't used to thinking that they're not number one. But you know, the growth economy in the world right now, the number one great big monster economy is China. And in years way in the future, the growth market of the future probably will be India, which will leave us with another surprise, and that is you'll have India first, China second, and the US third. And not many Americans are used to talking about America as third. And yet, when we're talking about wealth, just standard of living, quality of life, we're back to good old GDP per capita. And there we see that the oncomers have a long way to go before they rival the U.S. So pardon me for clarifying that. And before I don't know whether you can do it, but before we post your PowerPoint slides on Moodle, it would be a good idea if you could take a look at that chart and in the lower left and see if, just check it out. I think you'll find that there's a change that's needed there.
Of course, sure. Okay, so continuing on with the same economic indicators, we've got inflation overlaid on top of each other and the unemployment rate. One thing of note in particular, you could see that the inflation kind of follows the U.S., those fluctuations there. And the unemployment rate, however, though, for China is relatively flat because the citizens of China do not get a choice of whether or not they want to work. It's
That's right.
dictated to them, yes. So,
Yeah, everybody works.
yes. Okay, so the top chart there is interest rates provided from the Bank of China. And it has averaged around 6.17% from 1996 till now. It reached an all-time high of 10.98% in 96 and a low of 4.35 in 2015. All right, and then the bottom chart is the exchange rates with the U.S. dollar. And in China, they have the yuan. And the number of yuan to purchase $1 US has actually fallen over the years. It bottomed out in 2014, and it's going up again, and it's had a slight dip recently. And what this really all means is that if the yuan falls, John Deere can leave its profits actually in China.
Right.
And appreciation from converting it to the U.S. dollar.
Yeah. So when it took more yuan to buy a dollar between 2014 and 2000, I don't know, early 2017, what you wanted to do as soon as you collected your receipts is convert them, send it over to the U.S. or a European bank, but get it into dollars real quick. Now it's dropping again, right? And so
Right.
the question is, do you think we should wait? You see a little wiggle there on the end, but this is what corporate treasurers do. They get all worked up over these charts. And if we drop back to 2006 and talk about the difference between 2006 and 12, that may be the reason why we've got so many dollars or dollar equivalents in foreign banks. Is the longer you wait to convert to dollars, convert foreign currency to dollars, the more dollars you can buy, right?
Yes.
So as we think about John Deere or Deere and Company as an international trader, as an international manufacturer, these kinds of things really come into play.
Okay, so now on to India, actually. Again, the same economic indicators. The volume of India as a percent change actually kind of mirrors the United States, though it's greater. GDP per capita on the bottom right. And we've got purchasing power parity of the United States, of course, is a little bit of a wealthier nation, with the population of India much greater than the United States.
Okay. By the way, that's an interesting looking chart on the lower left. Assuming that really is per capita, what it says is that folks are becoming wealthier. Now we've got GDP per capita at current prices and GDP per capita at purchasing power parity. Again, it's kind of like an itch I wish I could scratch, but there's a real smiling chart on the lower left. And I don't know whether that's GDP, PPP, or what, but we know the U.S. is not GDP because that's a flat line.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I need to check those. You're right.
Okay.
So what we have: interest rates, inflation, exchange rates, all on the same light. So interest rates there, current interest rates are around 6% in the country. They had a low of 4.2% and a high of around 7.3%. So it's leveling off in recent years around 6%. Inflation is much higher than that of the United States. And in general, when interest rates fall, inflation grows. So, but we don't see that. We actually see a leveling off here on these charts, and not so much of a heightened inflation rate. In the bottom left-hand corner, the Indian rupee exchange rate to the United States dollar is actually quite high. Approximately 65 rupees are needed to buy $1 US. As of today, I looked up the most current rate. In 2016, in the latter half, actually, it reached 70 rupees to purchase $1 US. So actually today it's $64 or 64 rupees, 38 cents. The unemployment rate in India actually decreased from 3.4% in 2016 and had an all-time high of 8.3% in 1983 and a record low of 3.46% in 2016. So more people are working. Clearly, they've got more people out in the workforce now, which means they have more money to spend.
Yeah, and if they have more money to spend, they're likely to consume more food, right?
That's right. Yes.
That's the relevance to deer. The real interesting part of India for deer it was probably agriculture, but equally interesting is the demand for construction. I don't know whether you've heard about it, but India's roads are awful, especially when you get into the interior. The demand for construction projects in India is almost unlimited.
All right, and just as a summary of the things we've talked about, actually the United States is a very stable market, actually very strong economy. The customers in the United States are the most able to afford John Deere products, and it's actually 50% of its sales still, as we'll talk about even more. The EU is also a strong economy, but we have to keep in mind that less than 2% of their overall economy is agriculture, and there's not much room for growth, as we saw in the arable land. Our emerging international growth markets, well, we've got China, of course, that we talked about, and India, and we'll talk about certain trends in farming and things like that. The dollar is strong in India, but weaker in China and the EU.
Right. I often tell my students in two international courses that I teach, one on basic international business and the other on international business strategy, that China is the growth market of the present and India is the growth market of the future.
So Nancy and I are going to kind of tag team this section a little bit.
A tag team. Oh boy, that's exciting. Okay.
So if you can go ahead and flip to the next slide.
Okay.
Okay. So basically right here for market drivers, the farm commodity prices, acreage planted, crop yields, land prices, weather, technology. These are all significant factors that affect the sales of ag and turf equipment. So these all are market drivers for Deere specifically and any heavy equipment industry. So this is just showing you the correlation between net farm income and production expenses. And here you see that net farm income for 2017, it doesn't seem to change from 16 after you see it declines from 2014 to 16, and it appears that expenses will continue on the same path as well. But net farm income is forecasted to rise in 17 after it has declined the previous 3 years.
And the relevance of this to Deere?
Well, this is just showing you, I mean, how crop prices and commodity prices do affect the sales.
Mm-hmm. And if income declines, as it has recently, would that affect Deere's sales of agricultural equipment?
Yes. Not, well, honestly, if we go back, if you're talking about farm income in general declining, but if we're talking about John Deere has a very well diversified product or customer base. And so just because, and we'll kind of hit on this some more in some other sections, but whenever you're thinking about a row crop farmer as myself, whenever commodity prices for me are low, that hurts me. That's a negative impact to me in my farm. But if you think about it, if corn's cheap, then to the chicken farmer or the hog farmer, they can buy that at a lower price. And so especially with the John Deere dealerships, we see that whenever commodity prices are low, and those that just are row crop farmers and that aren't diversified farmers with animal production as well, we see that in the bad years, the smaller ag equipment is still selling for those that are chicken farmers or hog farmers.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's just a point to make.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the U.S. farming trends that have been going on in recent years. And each of those data points there is actually a census done by the Department of Agriculture. And you could see that there has been a decline, actually, in the number of farms in the United States throughout the years. And that's also reflected on the right-hand side as well. And you could see the percent change from 2007 to 2012 was, it fell 4.3%. And the land in farms also fell, but the average farm size increased. So what this means is that there's a smaller number of farms in the United States, but they are slightly bigger than they have been in the past.
And this next slide basically just reiterates what Nancy was just saying. Basically, the takeaway is that farms are decreasing and the average farm size is increasing. So this means that the average smaller farmer is declining and farming operations are becoming larger and more commercialized.
Yeah. And again, the impact on deer?
Well, we were just showing trends as it relates to planted acreage. And
sure, but is there an impact of this shift in the category, the size of farms?
Yeah, well, I guess you could kind of relate it to smaller farmers are being they don't have, with the higher input costs now and the lower prices and commodity prices, they're kind of in a bind. They're not really able to continue to innovate and buy the fancier, more innovative types of equipment, and they're running older types of equipment. So I think farmers that are larger and that are having more buying power based on the
the agribusiness, the big agribusiness. Yeah. I'm actually thinking of Porter's Five Forces here.
Yeah, and I cover that, sir.
Okay, but and I don't want to get into too much detail because I know you will. But for sure, Deere is facing a larger, more sophisticated customer, right?
Yes.
In many cases now, with the small farms, they may not even be doing the business with Deere because Deere's equipment's more expensive, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and so this is my slide, and this is really just showing where the concentration of farms are in the United States. And you can see a lot of them are coastal areas and inside the breadbaskets. So we've got Iowa, Illinois, we've got Texas. But on the coast there, what's kind of worrisome for John Deere is that California there and Washington, and the future implications for John Deere clearly is if there's concentrated farms in any one area, they're more subject to any kind of natural disasters, and California in particular is getting hit right now with a number of wildfires. And they've had droughts in the past, significant droughts.
Yeah, the type of crop that we find out in California, really depending a little bit on where in California we're talking about, there's more than one agricultural market there. In the central, right where the CA is, that's fruit country, lots of melons and stuff like that in the Fresno area. If we go up north, we've got apples and pears and other kinds of fruit that grows on trees rather than on vines. And down in Southern California, again, it's a different kind of fruit. Among other things, you can buy a lot of oranges in Southern California.
All right, so the graph on the left is really just a little bit of forecast of where net farm incomes are forecast to be. And you could see that there is forecast to be a slight uptick in income for farms based on the previous year, which was down 24%.
Yeah, boy, it starts at, I guess this is an index, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
This came from the USDA, yeah.
Yeah, so, but if we start at 120 and we end up at 60, I'm not sure, but that's a 50% reduction.
Yeah. Oh, well, I was going from 2015 to 2016 was 24%.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, I mean, this is the source of funds from which the customer, an agriculture customer in this case, is going to pay DEERE for its equipment, right?
Yes. So
it's an indicator.
it is an indicator. Yes.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. So this particular graph, the thing to really keep an eye on is actually the green part of each bar, and that is crops, because John Deere sells equipment that cultivates crops. So you can see that we had a slight increase to 2012, and now it's actually decreasing and sort of leveling off, forecast for 2017. So they're not making, U.S. farmers are not making much profit from crops, and this could indicate future problems for John Deere if farms don't make money off crops and what their equipment does, and so there wouldn't be a need for their products.
Now, there's an interesting perspective on this. Everything Nancy said is absolutely correct. These are U.S. cash receipts, right?
That's correct, yes.
And so the question this begs is, are there other markets, other country markets, where cash receipts aren't declining and where opportunities are greater? And that's a question you guys may get into, so I won't try to answer it for you. But it simply begs a question. You know, we saw that DEERE has a very large portion of its business domestically. And so this then raises a question strategically. You know, what should DEERE be doing about this?
All right, so this chart is actually talking about the U.S. corn that's used in ethanol, which is, of course, fuel. And the United States has some regulatory incentives to produce corn for ethanol. And you could see that it's fairly high, and it's staying pretty level at the moment. And that's actually good news, because farmers can go produce corn on, make a profit off of that sort of thing on their farms in the United States, of course. All right, we have diesel prices from 2000 to 2017, and the reason we have diesel prices up here and its importance is that all John Deere equipment, agricultural equipment, uses diesel fuel. And it makes the purchase of them attractive or non-attractive based on diesel prices. So you could see during the economic downturn, diesel prices spiked as a lot of things then went down, and then went around $4 and then went down again. But there is a slight uptick in diesel prices, and that's kind of coinciding with the fuel prices, regular gasoline prices across the country.
Yeah, this gets us back to that unmet need stuff, Morgan. Back when I was working on this case with students several years ago, as the price of diesel fuel was going up, some of the unmet needs had to do with diesel engines' efficiency and the ability, and which is with the ability of engines to use diesel. Eric, you can help me with this, but ethanol diesel. I don't know how to say that, but
biodiesel.
Biodiesel. Thank you. I get hung up with that. Today, not so much of an unmet need, not like it was. So whereas we were looking for fuel efficiency back in those days, now we're probably looking for engine power because the fuel is a little more affordable, and we've got these great big farms that we're trying to sell to that want ever bigger equipment. And this, by the way, is even more the case in Australia, less the case in China and India. So, but their fuel situations aren't exactly the same as ours either. But it's just an interesting perspective. As these lines go up and down, those unmet needs go up and down too, don't they?
Yes.
And just to hit on the construction and forestry market drivers, each of these have an impact on sales for this segment. global construction markets and the housing market, especially like the residential housing market, infrastructure development, technology, regulations, and environmental issues are all market drivers for the construction and forestry segment.
Okay.
All right, so just some conclusions off our market analysis. Sort of the bad news first is that there's a trend to a smaller number of farms, but they're bigger. So that's kind of has plus and minuses as we go forward. The crop revenue and the overall net farm income is lower, as we saw as well. But the positive trends is that housing starts are rising. Did we have that slide in there? I still had that. I apologize. Which means as more construction starts, the greater need for John Deere products. Diesel prices are relatively low, which makes buying them attractive. And then, of course, the corn use and ethanol and the U.S. subsidies for such.
Okay.
And that brings us to the industry structure, where we're going to tie some of these things in. Did a little learning yesterday as I was watching the other presentation. Kind of made the same mistake with the development of the slides, but we're going to fix that as we go along. Let's go ahead and hit the.
I have no idea what you just said.
You'll see.
About I'm fascinated by the picture there on the right center one, where we've got what looks like a robot agriculture or piece of machinery. Forestry machinery. It looks like a robot, and then over on the left you've got a drone. So you chose some really great pictures here.
The major competitors for John Deere, C&H. Now that is a conglomerate group, and they are owned approximately 89% by Fiat. So all their numbers are hidden, and they're an asterisk, and they're behind the data.
Okay.
However, AGCO and Caterpillar, they're obviously you're going to be able to find those real easy just by searching their ticker numbers.
Whoops, sorry.
Yep, you're good. Let's see. Now here we have John Deere's operation categories. Now there's a reason for them being broken into the way they are. The heavy equipment industry consists of products that range from hedge trimmers all the way up to large tractors and bulldozers. The machinery manufacturing consists of companies that manufacture end products that apply mechanical force. That's the common denominator in there. So therefore, that's where we get into the requirements of being able to forge, stamp, bend, and form metals. Metallurgy is a very important component of that, and that's one that John Deere excels through with some of their advanced R&D. Welding and assembly and other parts are, again, important aspects, and efficiency there is where John Deere has another advantage. To simplify the industry structure, the North American industry codes were developed for boundary consistencies, and that creates the farm machinery and equipment, the lawn and garden, the construction and forestry segments. And then, of course, John Deere has a third component, which we'll discuss a little further, about the financial services. Next slide. The agricultural and turf equipment is the largest segment for John Deere, comprising of approximately 70% of their sales between 2011 and 2015. Ag includes a full line of agricultural equipment, including tractors, harvesters. We already discussed that. The turf equipment business consists of gardening machinery, such as mowers for golf courses, utility vehicles. John Deere's major farming equipment competitors in North America are AGCO and C&H. Now, C&H, just a little bit more on that one. That is a group I'm going to mention off a couple of names you'll probably recall having seen over the years. That's Case, International Harvester, New Holland, and yeah, those are the big ones that you've seen out there. And basically, they've all conglomerated all into one. One's bought the other, then the other one bought that one. And somewhere along the line, Fiat got a hold of them. So we'll go to
Just
the
a little quick clarification. Case up in North Dakota is an American construction equipment manufacturer. New Holland is a little bit more complicated, but it is generally a European agricultural equipment manufacturer. So Case New Holland comes together. And pretty much, we've still got the majority of construction equipment in the U.S. and agriculture in Europe.
Yes.
Okay.
So inside the industry, again, the farming is cyclical and in nature, with commodity prices rising and falling like the tides. As farmers do well, so does John Deere's agricultural division. Farming consists, however, of all forms of farming, and when commodity prices go up, John Deere sells combines. When they drop, John Deere sells small tractors around the 20 to 40 horsepower range.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Cattle, hog, and livestock producers, because lower commodities means lower feed costs.
Tell me when you want to switch it, Eric. Do you want me to flip the slide?
Yes, go ahead and flip the slides. Now, this slide does not contradict what we just previously discussed. It simply shows that big tractors and big combines equal big sales numbers. Mm-hmm. Conversely, little tractors equal little sales. So when we take a look at this slide, we start talking about the drop in sales. However, they may have sold less, but they definitely have, they still continue to sell. Mm-hmm. So, and then there's parts. So we're going to go to the next slide. We're talking about the margin squeeze. Dealers, North American agriculture market is a mature market. It's been in existence over 100 years, with many pressures to decrease costs. John Deere's margins were squeezed between 2013 and 2015. It also squeezed its competitors. John Deere's manufacturing efficiencies, as well as its broad product line, allowed it to sustain its operations during the time, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. It even invested in expansion. But as an industry, there's definitely been a downturn that started back around 2013, and it's continuing through 2016, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. 2017 possibly upticking. Next slide. John Deere's dealer network in North America is extensive compared to its competitors. The vast dealer network was important due to the time-sensitive nature of farm operations. Farmers needed equipment to run for only a few weeks in the year to serve specialized operations. Dealers can quickly source parts, compete repairs, and get equipment running quickly when the farmer needs it out in the field. Without an expansive dealer network, customers would have to travel and wait to have their equipment fixed. The absence of a quick fix could be catastrophic for a farmer. So the definitely inside the industry, dealerships as well as customer responsiveness are key for anybody working in the heavy equipment industry.
Just a quick sort of a footnote to what Eric pointed out. I think that if folks aren't familiar with this industry, they can't appreciate just how significant that relationship between the manufacturer and the dealer is. Some of these dealers are large businesses, especially when you get into heavy, real big equipment like Caterpillar makes. If you've ever walked into a Caterpillar dealership, you think you're in an industrial plant. You've got these great big overhead cranes. Some of this great big equipment is not shipped intact from the manufacturer, but it's shipped knocked down as a kit. And then the kit, including the combine and some of the big equipment that Deere makes, is assembled when it gets to the dealer. So they've got all these overhead cranes and all this heavy equipment. They even have engineers. And so this is an alliance relationship between the manufacturer and the dealer. This is a strategic alliance, and each one needs the other
Yes.
I'll switch the slides. For those of you who have not worked with me before, I'm now being attacked by a dog.
Okay, so then all of a sudden John Deere decided they were going to consolidate some of their dealerships around the mid-2000s. Dealerships began to reflect the changing competitive landscape within the industry. Again, it's a mature industry, so there is pressure on keeping costs down and being more efficient. And John Deere's response to that was by bringing down the number of dealerships, they were able to decrease overproduction to stock multiple dealerships when you were in the facing of declining number of farms. And John Deere asked the smaller dealers that were unable to meet their goals to cash out to the bigger dealers. Consolidation needs fewer personnel to operate and collect, hopefully collect less bad loans from smaller dealerships, and dealers are less likely to have price wars as remaining distributors deal with bigger territories. You end up with a more solid management skill set, and that means less discounts to clear out surplus inventory during a recession. And that was key on what helped John Deere survive this last downturn. Next slide.
Okay, please pardon me for the distraction, everybody. That was my dog, Waffles. Waffles has figured out, he's much smarter than I am. And he knows that we're in the middle of these presentations. He's got me. And so he attacks me. And the only way I can get him off me is by paying him with a dog treat. But tonight, Waffles decided that that wasn't enough, that he was just going to knock my papers and everything else around and just give me a bad time. But he has now been satisfied, and I don't think we'll be bothered anymore. Please excuse me.
All right. Now, here we have Deere in their agricultural equipment segment profits. Again, you can start to see that downturn in profits. While John Deere's profits come mostly from the agricultural portion of the industry as a whole, and mainly from the North American market, the diverse industry of heavy equipment have a number of common themes and strategies despite their attempts to differentiate between their companies. So the number one common strategy is seeking growth in overseas markets with current trends as an industry in Asia Pacific, Eastern Europe, and South America. Few are betting heavily on Africa despite the vast land and population growth there. After all, $1 a month disposable income makes it hard to find a person who can afford that green paint. Africa is ripe, however, for heavy equipment industry to begin partnerships with the World Bank and non-government organizations to assist in creating better growth opportunities in the central to southern regions where the governments are slightly more stable. The construction and forestry portion of the industry as a whole, now that is the second largest portion of for John Deere. Total sales ranged between 16 and 21% between 2011 and 2015. You start to see that come up a little bit. It provides a wide range of machinery-related service parts for use in construction, earth moving, timber harvesting, and Caterpillar is their number one competitor in there. This is a logical extension since the initial products were built for farms, and they continued to expand with competencies gained in agricultural research and development and the economies of scale through the manufacture of the steel and heavier equipment. So moving into the construction and timber industry, again, was a logical extension. Next slide. Financial services. John Deere's smallest segment is their financial services. Their total sales were between 6.3 and 9.1% during that 2011-2015. It complements the two larger segments by providing wholesale financing to the dealers of John Deere's machinery. Offers equipment warranties and extensions, revolving charge competitors in this part of the market is major banks such as Wells Fargo and JP Morgan. And we're going to go to the next slide, which I borrowed from you, sir.
Okay. Let's see. There was the one thing that may not be on this slide. We see the portion of revenue or sales in this slide represented by John Deere Finance. What we don't see is the portion of total profit. John Deere Finance revenue is relevant here, but I think if you were to take a look at the finance company's contribution to Deere's profit, you'd probably see some significantly larger proportions.
Yep, it's in there. It's coming.
Oh, it's coming.
Yes, sir.
Pardon me, I'm sorry.
All right. Now, this is a hypothetical financial transaction. I kind of traced it. It's a very busy.
Really do that? Did you trace this thing?
Yes, sir, I did.
Oh.
Let's see if I got it right. It's
Okay.
a busy slide. You start at the top right and follow the money. John Deere borrows $10 million from Bank of America with a 3% interest. John Deere manufactures the equipment with a cost of goods sold to $8.5 million. Then they sell the equipment to dealers, farmers, contractors, loggers through their finance with a 10% finance cost. John Deere receives $11 million for that sales and pays back the Bank of America $10.3 million. They're $10 million plus the interest. That leaves John Deere with a $700,000 profit, or a combined 7% profit margin. Then you get over to the top left. The sales and the profit margin generates demand from investors and allows John Deere to borrow $100 million in bonds at a 5% given out over 7 to 10 years. This cash flow is 10 times larger, but with a 2% increase in expense of the capital. That still leaves John Deere with a 5% profit margin through this same process, but 10 times greater sales volume. So the bottom line is the banks give you $700,000 in profit from a $10 million loan, and that generates demand from investors. It leads to bonds of $5 million in profit from $100 million borrowed over a 7 to 10 year period. So I think that pretty much sums up that slide.
Eric, if you decide to give up being a teacher, I'll be glad to help you get into investment banking. That's where I used to be. And if you can do this, you've got the makings of a crackerjack investment banker. Well done.
Okay, so now you talked about farm credit. What's that blue line on the right look like, sir? Impressive?
Oh, yeah.
Agriculture and construction are similar in profit margins at a little more than 5%. Finance, however, since there's no cost of goods sold, over the overall profit margin is roughly 35%. Hello, compound interest. These slides demonstrate how John Deere is using an industry inside of an industry. Banking inside a heavy equipment industry allows for increased sales and profit margins, generating significant investment interest through both stock and bond demand. As an industry, driving forces on profit margin include government regulation, EPA emissions, land set-aside programs to strengthen commodities in the 80s, commodity price support programs by the federal government, and World Trade Organization agreements. Additionally, industry forces include innovative trends in technology, complexity of both manufacturing and the products themselves, adding GPS heads-up displays. Variable depth planting has led to the innovations such as precision farming with irrigation, drone technology, and an application of increasing yields per acre. So when we talk,
should I have changed the slide, Eric?
No, sir.
Okay.
I had to add this in because this is where the industry, this talked about John Deere's major segments, and I was missing the industry.
Okay.
I did not want to leave out the industry because this is where we're doing the industry analysis.
Okay.
It's just that if you are a company that focuses on ag and construction or forestry, and you don't have this credit division, you don't have the profit.
That's right.
Help you drive the investments. Your stock price kind of goes flat. Your dividends kind of go flat or drop. All of those things are affected. With John Deere having the industry inside the industry, it allows it to have a
This
a
is
much better future forecast, and we're going to go into that here in a little bit too.
okay. This is the classic complementer,
Yes.
where you may be a great designer and producer of machinery, but sometimes in industries there's a complement that's required to accomplish the mission, and in this case, to achieve production and sales that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. John Deere didn't start out trying to be a finance company or run essentially they've got their own investment bank, and frankly they've got their own bank, John Deere Finance Company, but they do investment banking because they're into bonds, and they're banking customers, they're banking their customers, very sophisticated finance. And John Deere makes a lot of money from doing that. But they make a lot of money because they make machinery, and it just turns out that the return on the financing part of the business happens to be quite lucrative.
Okay, we're going to go to the next slide. And yes, I made a mistake.
Oh,
I believe the ROE and the ROA should be switched.
okay.
Because that big jump, normal for the return on assets, normal for the return on income, pretty much inside. It's a little bit above the industry standard, but as far as the big four, they're sitting right up there. Again, apologize, but CNH has not been around for 5 years, so I can't do a 5-year comparison. But the ROE is where the return on equity is where you're seeing that big jump. You put money into John Deere, they're going to turn around and make a big dollar out of it just because of that internal financing that they're able to drive sales with and help people buy their products.
Are you able to fix this graph before we put it on Moodle, Eric?
The problem is, sir, I did that with an Excel spreadsheet and imported it and then deleted the Excel spreadsheet.
Oh, okay. All right.
Short answer is yes. Long answer is it's going to take a little bit.
Yeah. Maybe we can simply put a note. Perhaps I can. Give me a second and I can do it very quickly.
Okay.
All right.
It is
I have to do what you don't want me to do here, and that's to use another form of presentation here, but it'll work for me. Just a second. Later on, what I'll do is I could have actually done it right now, but I could have used the little Word box and just covered them both over and put the correct labels on them. I'll do that later.
okay. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you for telling me. You know, it's human to make a little glitch like that. No big deal. Let me get us back to where you want it to be.
Sure.
Okay, off we go.
Yep, and get rid of that error. There you go. Okay, now we're looking at a 5-year trend of profitability, and you can start to see all of those things just going downhill. Net margins, the dividend yields. This just shows that agriculture is cyclical. So, next slide.
Oh, okay.
Again, the past 5 years have been good to Caterpillar, but hasn't been so kind to others, including John Deere via sales revenue. In 2012 was the end of the high commodity prices, allowing row crop farmers to buy large ag machines. Caterpillar has been the beneficiary of, quote, shovel-ready jobs. No, I'm not going into politics. Tax incentives from the last administration, while the companies with a strong agricultural basis has felt the downturn resulting from returning to baseline commodity prices. John Deere, however, has taken the boom years leading up to 2012 and 2013 and plowed those profits into expansion of manufacturing facilities in emerging markets and technology. While investors like competitors now, long-term investors can see that John Deere has been priming a pump with reserve capacity. As GDP continues to climb in the future, John Deere is ready to and waiting for another production shift and churn out equipment to meet the next boom cycle in forestry, mining, and or ag sectors.
What year was this done, Eric? What year does this reflect?
The last 5 years, sir. So 2016 to 2011, going backwards. It was a 5-year average.
Okay. What confuses me is the quarter-over-quarter growth, and it refers to most recent quarter, the second quarter. So we've got some quarter reports here. Then we've got a 5-year average, and then we've got a year-over-year, which means it's a 1-year growth rate. So we've got quite a collection of indicators here. I don't know if you can clarify any of this for us.
Yeah, no.
Okay. Your note here indicates that it was retrieved in November 17. If you get anything more current about this, shoot me a note and I'll try to put it on the slide for you.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Now this was a nice little graph, and way in the back seat, almost in the back row, you see that the dividend 5-year average growth rate, if you look in the back, you see each row, starting with the big blue lines, that represents the gross margin over the past 5 years. On the left is John Deere, then Caterpillar, AGCO, CNH, no 5-year history, and then the industrial average. Look at the dividends in the back. John Deere operates in a cyclical industry which has been in a downturn, but John Deere has not increased its dividend in 2014. But prior to its dividend freeze, John Deere had maintained a high dividend growth rate. From 2009 to 2014, John Deere had more than doubled its dividend. Industry with growing dividends is another key factor that you're talking about, a mature phase of the industry. John Deere is one of a group of 272 stocks with a 10-plus year history of consecutive dividend increases. So it has a strong marketing force with its dividend for sale and to create demand for its stock.
Yeah, normally we would simply say that John Deere's management has a strong commitment to the shareholders. I think that what impresses me more, to be candid with you, is the first 2 rows, where we see that Deere does a great job of generating gross margin, simply the profit from sales. And right behind it, the operating margin also, the 5-year averages, where we see that Deere has got a higher average than the other firms that we're comparing, AGCO and Caterpillar. So all things considered, what we're doing, I think, is complimenting Deere for being a more profitable than average company in the heavy vehicular equipment industry. So when we see that downturn in Deere's profit margins and sales and profit margins in some of those prior charts, I think what this does is put it all into an industry perspective, and that industry perspective leads us to respect Deere for actually having been a very efficient company. That's where the gross margins come from, and more profitable than average.
If you would allow me to read my last paragraph, sir, I think I might be able to sum that up for you. Gross margin and operating margin are above both industry standards as well as competitors. Another indicator of efficiency in operations with a boost from its financial division.
You mean if I'd have shut up and let you say it, we wouldn't have spent all that time?
Spin on past the next slide, sir.
Okay.
And I got nothing other than a fancy graph.
What?
Well, no, that just for this slide.
Do you want me to flip the slide or wait for you to pull my leg?
Yeah, go ahead and flip the slide.
Okay.
I reversed
We're on Porter's 5 forces. Is that
yes, we are. And I reverse engineered it for you. So I gave the snapshot up first as opposed to at the end. So you can start to see the 5 forces as well as the degree of pressure on John Deere. So we're going to talk about these one at a time, going from green to red.
Okay, but in fact, you may have reverse engineered it because when we go through the analysis, we do it one step at a time. But I usually ask people to show us their conclusion first because many people really don't understand, and I'm talking about people who have graduate degrees, don't understand the purposes of doing the 5 forces and perhaps other models as well. But simply to remind everybody who's looking at this video or listening to this presentation, we do this drill in order to assess the profit potential of an industry and strategy priorities. And here you've shown us where the pressure on profit's coming from. And where is it coming from?
It is basically from the mature industry with the competition between the rivalries.
Yeah, rivalry and?
The buyer power.
Which adds to the rivalry. And just to pour a little salt on the wound,
you got a little bit with the supplier power as well, because the different components in the metallurgy.
Okay, and the cyclical nature of the steel industry, and for that matter, the other components that go into the machines may not be the same as the cyclical nature of the machinery industry. So your conclusion that you're going to justify with the evidence that you're going to show us is what with regard to the profit potential of this industry?
Well, I actually have those slides at the end.
Okay.
Summary.
All right. But nevertheless, then what we want to do is alert the people who are watching this presentation that there are at least significant forces that press profit potentials in this industry.
Yes.
Okay.
And they set up the need for the strategy. So
yeah. Okay.
Okay, so we talk about the threat of new entrants. There's a pretty much low risk. There's a lot of capital that goes into building these giant pieces of machinery. A lot of things are proprietary through patents. So the threat of new entrants is small. Government regulations are not much of a deterrent for new entrants here in North America, but they are definitely a presence in the emerging markets such as China, Europe, and India. They like to protect their own businesses and allow them to grow from within, so they're going to put pressure on anybody trying to bring stuff in, make it a little bit more expensive, however they can do it. But all in all, the threat for the industry, threat of new entrants is relatively small, mainly because of the capital intensity to start up a business. Threat of substitutes, low to medium risk. Agriculture equipment is mostly interchangeable with other manufacturers' equipment. However, tend to purchase one brand to ease their maintenance, finance, a single source location for dealer assistance. So the threat of substitutes is there, but yet it's not.
Yeah. When we talk about threat of substitutes, we're really talking about alternative industries. So if you're a coffee addict, what's a substitute? I guess a Coke, you know. Those are two different industries that both can provide customer satisfaction and quench a thirst. So when there's a substitute, it sort of puts a ceiling on the pricing of your industry. Now, in agriculture, construction, and forestry machinery, what's the alternative? you know, an old plow drawn, pulled by a mule. You know, I mean, the substitutes of agriculture, construction, and forestry machinery are essentially nil today, aren't they? Unless we can come up with some marvelous new way of making crops grow and keeping the land managed. So threat of substitutes, you know, pretty low, right?
Yes.
There's not much that you can find to replace what DEERE and its competitors make.
Correct. So then we go on to the bargaining power of the suppliers. Now there's a moderate risk here. DEERE has managed to keep other competitors from driving up their prices by building its own supply chain. That's mainly if they're going after a mine with the rare earth minerals and they're able to find it, then they don't have to buy it, and it doesn't have to be listed out, and somebody can't come around and look at somebody else's books and go, oh, that's how they make that stuff. So trying to be a little bit more protective, as well as protect their source of the metals and some of the things that they need to be competitive. But it's still a moderate risk because they still got to go out on that open market, and raw materials used in the industry to produce heavy equipment. The companies that utilize unique materials to increase the strength are subject to price changes, like I said, such as rare earth metals.
Okay.
John Deere took care of that, though. Now there's a little bit of information here. Polymer suppliers may provide a balance to traditional metal components. Don't want to pick a fight with you because I know you're partial to steel. But this polymer piece is something that popped when I looked at their management structure. So I'm going to just put that as a side note. We'll come back to that here in a little bit.
You're going to be surprised how agreeable I am. One of my best clients was the largest supplier of plastic compounds to the vehicular equipment and the automotive industry in the world. So you really won't surprise me as much as you think. It's still in this industry. It's you know, steel is probably the most substantial input, but we've got things in addition to plastic compounds for tires and the like, as you have here. We've got all those electrical components as well.
Correct.
And including computers. And I think as time passes, they're becoming more important.
Correct. Bargaining power of suppliers, moderate to risk to high.
Buyers or suppliers?
Buyers.
Okay.
We're on the right slide. John Deere is the world leading manufacturer of agricultural equipment with a current market share of 31%. However, primary competitors in the tractor and agriculture equipment industry, they're still there.
Yep.
And it doesn't, like I said, you buy a John Deere plow today and a John Deere tractor tomorrow, you can go out and buy a New Holland baler from C&H. Farmers are loyal to a brand and would buy parts that would only buy parts that would fit the brand name. So they're kind of a quirky bunch. If you get it's kind of like Ford and Chevy on the racetrack out on NASCAR. You're either a Ford fan or you aren't. And likewise, when it comes to John Deere or Massey Ferguson, they tend to stick through generations with those tractors.
Be careful, you're going to get Morgan upset here.
No, she's got a collection of toy tractors right above her head. Large farms and corporations as well as governments enjoy the bargaining power, however. They can pick and choose. So degree of rivalry is very high. The heavy machinery industry as a whole has intense competition. There's more than 1,000 companies producing tractors, agriculture equipment, and half of all those revenues are being generated by the top 4 companies. Most companies have specialized in specific segments of the industry. Caterpillar, for instance, is in construction. John Deere's in agriculture mostly. Valmont's in irrigation. Toro's in landscaping. Major corporations use their strategic advantages to differentiate themselves from their competitors. Price competition between the top 3 rivals was low as a result, and competition is centered on overall value, not just the price. So you might be able to buy something cheaper, but it's that value that John Deere represents. So in summary, the price competition between the top rivals is low. The profit potential for John Deere comes from their mature market in North America and their prolific product line of equipment. In addition, John Deere's research and development and their 100+ years of patent technologies, along with their recent acquisitions of Blue River, places them on the cutting edge of developing technologies and further their production differentiation. Due to John Deere's extensive engineering expense as well as its specialized development of metallurgy, components for John Deere equipment is not easily substituted. Their history and technology has also developed a strong brand following with customers willing to pay for their name and reputation of reliable equipment and prompt customer service. Next slide. And this is where we get into developing the strategies. So that was the profits. This is the strategy portion that you were talking about with the Porter's 5 forces. Continue to pursue an aggressive global strategy, combining market penetration with key dealership additions. Focus on acquisitions, adding innovative technologies that will help John Deere through product development and enhance current research and development. Develop an international water management division. Water's the new oil in about another 10 years. Product differentiation focused on leading edge, combining current geopositioning technologies from ag construction along with the auto driving and some of the other pieces of technology with emerging auto applications. Sorry, I doubled myself there. With legal expertise and access to government regulators. Trying to get a tractor to drive itself in the field is one thing, but taking and applying that to some of their construction equipment and having those tractors back up and load and back up to be loaded by a loader, those things are out there. It's being done. But once you start putting them on the road, then that auto driving, they need to get some legal expert and get some help with some of the government regulators. I don't know how well they're going to like 20 tons of corn being delivered by no driver.
Yeah. So let's see. Our number one force pushing profit down is rivalry.
Correct.
And the approach to responding to rivalry,
differentiation.
We've got to have both differentiation and, to the extent possible, low cost. But clearly, this has to be a differentiation-focused strategy, right? That's the objective, is to get differentiated. And you've provided a number of ways to accomplish that here. The other one, I guess, was buying power, and unfortunately, that does put Deere into a position where that differentiation has to be so great that it justifies the higher price that Deere charges for its equipment. But to the extent that it can control its costs, then that enables Deere to make its products a little more affordable to more customers, be they foresters or construction contractors or agribusinesses. But I think that when you put those two forces together and then add a little supplier power, that's a pretty strong brew.
Okay, for the industry structure summary, we're talking about some of the major takeaways are that the heavy equipment industry is relying ever increasingly on the degree of, back up one, sir.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. Ever increasingly on the degree of computer integration in the operation of machinery that has its roots in 100-plus-year-old job, cutting down trees, building roads, plow the land, plant and harvest crops, and build houses nearby. Used to be done with a strong back and a horse. Another trend is that the increased number of machines designed to consolidate operations, like Deere's cotton picker that picks the cotton in the front and drops out a wrapped bale of cotton in the back. No-till farming lets a single pass of a tractor prepare the soil, plant, fertilize, and get off the field. The recent downturn has required larger manufacturers to explore self-financing and insurance, increase insurance on their warranties, increasing the risk exposure while facing downward sales pressure. So now we go to the next slide. We kind of break down that thing a little bit further. We got heavy equipment industry has strong rivalries, agricultural sector, sensitive to cyclical ups and downs, sensitive to exchange rates, where 1% rise within the US dollar is a reciprocal 0.3% drop in exports. Adding a finance component to assist with sales can increase profit margins through compound interest without expense. Next slide. The future focus includes increase and decrease in regulations. Diesel engine and metallurgy R&D provides success for future platforms, transferable construction, forestry, and mining equipment segments. You just take that diesel engine, you put it in any one of those pieces of equipment. Mergers and acquisitions need to be focused and concentrated on patent acquisition because it's cheaper than some forms of R&D, or manufacturing and dealership in targeted market areas to expand your presence globally. Light duty equipment segment provides a better return on investment while increasing market share, especially with governments. And we're talking the 20 to 80 horsepower tractors there. Leading indicators include increasing GDP while interest rates are low with stock prices rising. Lagging indicators, the change in labor costs and the drop in unemployment is going to put some pressure on your wages. The 2017 change in tax laws decreased corporate tax rates along with repatriation rates for the cash that's overseas. That could be another force that you see affecting the industry structure as a whole. And then we're passing it off to whoever's got financial analysis.
All right, I'll take over.
Okay.
Okay, so this is a slide that you see, just a big overview of what we're going to be looking at in the next few slides. So if you want to flip to the next one, Dr. Roney. All right, so this is just a breakdown of financial spreadsheet from the previous slides, and we're just going to highlight a few things that kind of stand out. I tried to put a little bit of symbols in there to give you a good visual, but I feel like, you know, I liked how we laid out the slides because you could greatly see how that dip in 2009 was the recession and how everything kind of correlates with your sales, your operating margin goes up, your ROI, all that kind of correlates together. So I thought that was a good way to bunch it all together to kind of have a great visual of that. But I will have to say that it was interesting when I was doing some research that even though it was the worst economic downturn in that 2009, they were still very profitable, you know, considering their company. So I thought that was pretty great that it's still, they were solidly profitable, strengthened its financial and liquidity positions. But some big things to look at, if you look at that between that 2011 and that 2013 period in their sales, it was a very big hike of about $15 billion. And what we looked at on that is that this was mostly due to their commodity prices, which Morgan kind of talked about, which resulted in more farm income. So thus there was more equipment sold to, you know, more equipment that the farmers bought. So to give a good example on that, this was around like your corn prices. So before that 2011 period, they were $4. Then after that period, it was $8. So imagine a double hike in that. And so they were making some good money to purchase some equipment. But also during that 2012 and 2013 period, That was one of their most successful years, which included their cash receipts remained at historical high levels. But also you start seeing it kind of dwindle down, and that's when we talked about this cyclical peak, and then it starts going down. So I know we talked about that a lot, and that's what you're going to see in agriculture as well as construction. You know, you talked about steel, you know, that's another piece of it when we go into the construction business and all that. So you're going to see as you look at the slides, everything starts trending down after that 2013, 2014 period. All right. So also in 2009, Morgan talked a little bit about it. There was a joint venture in India that was formed with Ashcott Gleeland Limited to manufacture backhoes and four-wheel drive loaders. So that was helped to increase seeking an increase in sales during that time. So after that period, you see all that going up, those sales. And then for the operating margin, that's really about your sales, you know, going faster than your rate of expenses. So, you know, that was really around DEERE had an effective pricing model, as well as showing their efficiency in projects implemented that were paying off for the company. If you also, another thing that I thought was pretty important was around the 2011, DEERE's income increased to 50%, or they increased 50%, but they sold its wind and energy business. So they had that and they sold that off. They were kind of looking towards the future, and they said, okay, I think this is possibly going to have negative earnings outlook, and so they sold that off. For DEERE's ROE, which is really your just growth rate, they rose significantly between that 2009 and 2012 time frame, which shows a strong return and efficient use of shareholders' investment dollars. And then for ROI, I put the little symbols on there. You know, it was pretty great when they hit 25%, and even better when they hit, you know, about 28, 29%. So I thought that was pretty awesome. But really, that just shows that how well they turned invested capital into profit there.
Yeah.
So they did a great job.
Okay, you did a really good job of summarizing this, Meredith. And I think we talked when we had a team meeting about the break-even effect. And what we see is that, you know, the profitability of a company like DEERE with such high fixed costs of all their manufacturing, it results in profits being very volume sensitive, because those fixed costs are going to be fixed. Whether the sales volume is high or low, the fixed costs are just there. So when the sales go up, the break-even point is surpassed, and the more it's surpassed, the higher the profit margin. And so if we look at these graphs, we see that maybe not perfectly, but generally, the profitability and the rates of return parallel the sales chart. And that's what Meredith started the conversation out with, and that's why I complimented her. I think that it's really important to appreciate that in an asset-intensive industry like this, companies tend to be quite volume sensitive. You want me to flip it?
Well, I was just going to add some more things that I had done some.
Oh, okay. I'll keep my finger off the button.
You know, I can't stop talking sometimes. But yeah, so that strong year that DEERE had between the 2012 and 2013 really centered around the result of sound execution of their strategic business plans, their centered global expansion, and disciplined cost and asset management. The performance, as you've heard in the previous slides from the team members, was led by the Ag and Turf division due to their advanced products to the market, and they have such a wide, diversified range of products. Their broadened customer base and reinforcement of position in key markets. Also, the continued success was aided by positive farm conditions, which we've talked about, which included higher sales of large equipment, mostly in the United States. And not to be redundant, but the current downturn in DEERE's agriculture as well as construction follows that cyclical peak in 2013. Another big thing I thought when I was doing some research is in 2015, DEERE sold their crop insurance segment of their business and their risk agriculture to Farmers Mutual Health, they were really seeing that the crop insurance margins were slipping, while credit losses had been increasing, kind of going up. So they really wanted to free up John Deere's credit portfolio and focus on core business strategies. I think they were pretty smart and going to go ahead and see that, it wasn't a good outlook. And they were getting a lot of claims that were raising costs, and they needed to push that segment to somebody else. And then in that 2014, 2016 timeframe, around the cyclical peak, there was also a result of weaker conditions in the global farm economy, lower commodity prices, and falling farm incomes. Conditions were more positive in the U.S. livestock sector, providing support to the sale of smaller size of equipment. Really based on these factors, industry sales for agriculture machinery in the U.S. and Canada decreased. But there was also, when I was doing a lot of their reading on their annual reports and 10K and all, it really talked about the negative currency translation. So that really goes back to what Nancy was saying in result to our U.S. dollar compared to, I don't know the names of the other dollars, but how that was negatively impacting us there. So I thought that was a big important concept to hold out there. But you can flip to the next slide, Dr. Roney. Okay, so when we look at shareholders' equity in the top left, in 2008 and in the end of year 2013, those little stars right there, you see those little dips? Deere and Company Board of Directors authorized the repurchase of additional common stock. So when I was researching this, a typical buyback will also shrink your shareholders' equity. And the reason that they do this is due to either underevaluation, boosting financial ratios, paying off those investors, or reducing the cost of capital. So I thought that was interesting when I started to do some research on that was what I found, is those little dips at the times that they repurchase their stocks on there. And then we look at long-term debt, and I have a little bullet point up there that talks about the greater than $2.5 billion for acquisitions and capital expenditures. These slides greatly correlate to what the movements were going on in the company around those mergers and acquisitions. But the one thing to know about long-term debt is it's expenditures that can't be paid back within a year. So these are like long, consistent payback periods that they're going to have. It's not something that they can pay off, next year. I mean, in the next few months or anything like that. And we're going to talk about that more as we get to the leverage piece of it. But your invested capital, that's really just your sum of your shareholders' equity and your long-term debt on there. But some of the leverage pieces, I kind of put arrows in between each peak. Because those are very consistent with our acquisitions and mergers. Between that 2007 and 2008 period, Morgan had kind of touched on the merger or the acquisition of Lesco, which was the leading supplier of lawn care, landscape, golf, pest control products. And then 2008, which is when that little bump comes up, you've got a joint venture with construction equipment manufacturers in China and India, where Deere announced plans to build distribution and replacement parts, a training center in Russia, a European technology and innovation center in Germany, and a marketing office in Ukraine. During this time, John Deere expanded their water business with the company's acquisition of irrigation products, manufactures T-Systems International, and Plastro. So, man, they're growing in that period. If you look at 2009, I know had already talked about this, but this is when they formed that joint venture in India with Ashcott Leland Limited for the backhoes and the four-wheel drive loaders. But also during that economic downturn, they wanted to promote growth on a global scale. So that's when they included new manufacturing parts and manufacturing plants and parts complex in Russia to expand that global piece of it. And then as you look, and they were pretty aggressive in paying back a little bit before they kind of jumped to another high peak there in 2012. And the company had commitments of approximately $584 million for construction and acquisition of property and equipment that included completion of its 7 new manufacturing facilities in key markets to expand its growth. And then this includes France, Brazil, Russia, some of those big names that we've already said where we want to expand our growth in. And then in 2016, you see that little line creeping up there. They also picked up Moneson, which Morgan talked about. And then this purchase also included 4 facilities in France and 2 in the U.S. And then we look at the Hayu Group, which is more of our goal section on that, but that should have been a little bit higher with that merging. You know, overall, if you look at the leverage portion of it, it does get pretty high, and they're pretty much a very leveraged company. But I think it's important to note that it's common to use leverage to try and increase value for shareholders, and being over leveraged relative to income can be a really major red flag to investors from a risk standpoint. But in this respect, you know, we hope to see that DEERE increases their sales or decrease its leverage to balance out that equation on that. But also one thing to mention is that even though leverage has increased steadily, the reason that you know, they go to do this is to take advantage of low interest rates. Effectively, this means that equity capital is replaced by debt capital, which is really okay in current interest rate scenarios when you have the cushion to do so. So I think they made a very sound decision in expanding their global market, even though that did position them up higher in that leverage risk category. So, you know, looking at their financials, I mean, I think John Deere does a great job, and I think they have great strategies. But that's all I have on that side. If you want to flip it, Dr. Roney.
Okay, just a real quick one. I think you've done a good job sort of putting the perspective on this. You kind of see when you look at that leverage chart, kind of an implicit limit that the financial management has sort of said, let's not get more than 40% leveraged in our operations. They slip over it in 2012, as you say, to probably make an acquisition. But it looks to me like somebody is kind of addicted, you know, let no more than 40%, please. And if we do slip over the limit, let's get right back down there. But we're gonna set that as what appears to be a prudent limit. Now, the one thing we want to remember is that this leverage calculation does not include John Deere Capital, John Deere Finance, rather. If we included John Deere Finance, then the leverage rate.
We have to actually add a little.
You have it later? Okay. Okay.
No, I don't have it later, but we would have to go up on that percentage.
Yeah.
A little bit more to the 70% mark. Yes,
that's right. I think it gets, now my memory sometimes doesn't serve, but the number that comes to my mind is 74% the last
You're
time
right.
I heard. So in any event, this is the leverage for the operating part of the enterprise rather than the financial part. So given that the John Deere Finance does add a lot of leverage, somebody in financial management has issued kind of a cutoff point, and it sort of looks like that cutoff point is 40%.
40.
The 45 was an excess. You know, if I've guessed right, you know, as soon as they got to 45, they said, let's pay this thing right down, quick.
Okay, so on this slide, this is just a great visual. I know we've talked about our market, our key markets out there, and how well they perform as in relation to their net sales. But you can see, hands down, U.S. and Canada are leading in net sales for equipment operations. And then the rest of our key markets are pretty stagnant, except for in that Latin America, but not too much. It just seems to be very static in all our other markets over there. So I thought that was a great visual to add to our to our
Okay.
case over here.
I'm trying to advance the slide, but the machine is fighting me.
Okay, so one of the big things that I thought was pretty incredible about John Deere is their investment into research and development.
Right.
They're all about innovation, as you've heard from Eric and from Morgan, and what the products they have. I mean, talking about drones and driverless equipment and things like that. They invest so much in their research and development. And especially it's increased from 2009 to 2013, and you can see that in that green bar. And they have maintained high expenditures for this till 2016. Research and development is an important aspect to the company as well as the industry from both a product innovation standpoint and adapting to increased regulatory requirements. DEERE states that they invest close to $2 million per day in research and development across product engineering, quality, and manufacturing. They invest in technological advancements of their product lines in addition to sustainable business practices, including environmental stewardship. So as I'm talking, there's a lot of things that are tying into that piece that we've already talked about. So I'm hoping everybody's kind of getting the big picture of where they're going as far as a company goes. But and I really love their motto. It talked about eyes on the horizon. And I think this really speaks to research and development, and it helps them carry out their ambitious growth plans and its extensive investment in new products and capacity. I think that was pretty incredible. And $2 million a day, that's big.
A couple of quick observations. First, there's a strategic significance of this R&D, right? DEERE seeks competitive advantage through differentiation. And in this industry, as we've heard a number of times, whether it's the onboard computers or all the other devices that we've heard about, technology is where the action is. And so what we're looking at is the enabler of differentiation in this chart. I think also something else that impresses me is that although DEERE's revenues have declined in recent years, along with its operating profit, DEERE has not dropped its commitment to R&D expenditures very much at all. It still stayed right around 6%. So even though times are tough, when times are tough, the tough get going, right? Is that something like that? You want me to flip it?
Yeah, go ahead and flip it. We'll just talk about a conclusion slide here.
Okay.
Pretty much U.S. and Canada carry John Deere in sales. You saw that on that visual slide that I gave you compared to their key markets. The recession impacted John Deere. However, they were able to remain solidly profitable. Sales, operating margin, return on investment, and return on equity increased until 2013 when it hit a cyclical peak, then saw a drop. Increase in long-term debt and leverage consistent with acquisitions and expansion. And John Deere spends a vast amount of money on research and development that gives way to innovation and growth.
For sure.
And I believe that's all I have. And now we're going to move on to Tyler.
Okay, the first thing that I'm going to discuss is the manufacturing locations. The first one here, you can see where the star is. It's in Illinois, and the exact location is Moline, Illinois, which is the domestic or the headquarter location in the United States, which opened April 20th of 1964. It's consisted of 4 buildings that is located on 1,400 acres of land. On this land or on this property, there's offices for over 900 staff. It has an auditorium with 350 seats, and it also has the world's largest agricultural museum to show the history of farming and John Deere's creation, which was in 1837, which Morgan talked about when she discussed history. Next is the international manufacturing locations. The top arrow there is the European headquarters, which is found in Germany. And it's the largest outside of the agriculture machinery giant's North American base. And then the bottom arrow there is the Latin American headquarters, which is found in Brazil. Next is the SWOT analysis, not to get confused with SWAT. For strengths and weaknesses, it's internal, as you know, and that's the functional capabilities. So the first one that we have listed is the metallurgy, which Dr. Roney actually discussed a little bit earlier. But John Deere provides the best combo or the combination of hardness, toughness, wear resistance, and corrosion resistance properties of any coating on the market. Next is the wide range of products and services, which Morgan also discussed earlier. But just want to note that John Deere as a whole serves a very diverse customer base, and so that helps with the marketing trend situations. Next is design engineering. John Deere's engineers meet with customers to understand their needs, such as operating environment, the input and output requirements that they need, the transient and environmental requirements, voltage, loads, and levels, their current requirements, and the safety and fault requirements. The next is information technology, and I have there listed drones and GPS, and I think you've heard all of us discuss some of those, including Dr. Roney. Next is expertise. John Deere has construction and agriculture professionals, I guess you could say, that are there to give their input and their knowledge based on all of those. Next is financing capabilities, which Morgan also discussed this, but John Deere has more feasible options that won't be as detrimental to farmers because of threats due to market and economical rise and falls. They have loans, as Morgan discussed earlier, that have competitive rates and flexible terms, and their loans are for agriculture, construction, forestry, landscaping, and grounds care customers. And they also provide leasing for agriculture, construction, landscaping, grounds care, and golf customers. Next is the distribution system. John Deere Dealer is the first line of customer parts service. All over the world, there are dealers to serve agriculture, construction, lawn and grounds care, and off-highway engine customers. The company is dedicated to keeping the dealers equipped with necessary products and services to maintain their leadership role. And then that goes into worldwide operations as well, which we've been discussing the whole time, how it's universal and how it's all over. The next point that I have is the diesel engine manufacturing. Since 1949, John Deere has designed and manufactured more than 7 million off-highway diesel engines. They produce diesel engines for agriculture, construction, forestry, mining, generator drive, marine, and thousands of others across the world. Over 40 to 600 horsepower industrial diesel engines, and then 75 to 750 horsepower marine diesel engines. And then the last strength that we have listed is research and development, which Eric and Morgan discussed earlier, and then Meredith just hit on how important the research and development is for John Deere as well. Then we'll move on to weaknesses. And like I said, Meredith just hit on this as well with the leverage, but then Dr. Roney chimed in and said that whenever you're considering the finance company, it's up to, I believe you said 74%, Dr. Roney?
Yeah, that's the last number I remember.
Yes, sir. So that obviously is a weakness whenever you consider the before and after finance company borrowing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the nice part of this exhibit is that there are a lot fewer weaknesses than strengths, huh?
Right. Yes, sir. Moving on to opportunities and problems. And like I said earlier, strengths and weaknesses is internal, where opportunities and problems will be external. So the managers cannot control these things. The first few that I have listed will be discussed more in depth later for industry growth, developing nations, and developing technology. That will be discussed later in strategies, but I just wanted to mention those first. And then the last one for opportunity that we have is the aftermarket. And it's important for John Deere to focus on this, or for the aftermarket products and services, by finding ways to achieve additional growth and expand customer base for aftermarket support over the machine life cycle. And then moving over to problems. The first one is uncontrollable forces, and Morgan hit on this a little bit earlier, and just to list the weather, crop prices, and economics. And then cyclicality we have listed as a problem. John Deere's income or use will vary because of variations in the economy or the cycle of seasons. This affects returns on investment, asset class, and or John Deere's profits. Ag and construction are dependent on the state of the economy, making it both highly cyclical businesses. Due to this, John Deere must decide between short-term opportunities and long-term survival methods. John Deere has to be able to adjust demand due to the market fluctuations. And then the last one that we have listed there are government's protection of national industries, and we have China and India listed as like sub-bullets, and that's because the government can include tariffs or quotas for import and export. Purchase prices may increase, interest and exchange rates may also increase, and then the producer credit, and they may require subsidies for certain things. Okay, moving on to our conclusions. Okay, the first one that we have listed says, John Deere should reduce short-term debt by issuing more stocks and using the proceeds in order to stay competitive in the future markets. This will allow for maintaining its hold on the agriculture market by increased spending in product development and process innovations. The second one that we have listed, John Deere should concentrate its efforts on the internet market in order to represent in the industry and offer increased availability to its customers where its competitors are not equally established. And then the last one that we have is establish a strong base in the Asia markets to benefit the company in the coming years. Demand for agriculture equipment will increase due to the need of modern and efficient products for infrastructure and production capacities in this market. This will also increase the presence of John Deere in the developing markets.
Yeah, I think we saw earlier that India actually has the largest amount of land.
Yes, sir.
Certainly outside the U.S. that's available for agriculture. That certainly makes a lot of sense. I want to take a look at the first bullet here.
Okay.
To see if I read it correctly. John Deere should reduce short-term debt by issuing more stock, right, and using the proceeds to stay competitive. So what you're proposing is that Deere issue more shares of stock and take the proceeds and pay down its debt. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, off the short-term debt. So
issue short-term debt. Okay.
Or to reduce the short-term debt.
Should reduce short-term debt. Okay. And so we're going to reduce short-term debt by issuing stock. This isn't a finance course, so I won't delve into that too deeply, but you can imagine that the existing shareholders might have a little problem with that. Because if the value of the assets, the net assets that are in the company doesn't change any, and more shares are issued, then the value of each share remaining after the new shares are issued, the average value per share, the book value as it's called, goes down, right?
Yes,
okay.
sir.
And chances are the stock market will appreciate that, or frankly, they won't appreciate it. They'll recognize it, and the value of the shares in the market will go down. And that's called dilution, and the effect of diluting the value, that is making the average value per share go down. So companies do this. You're not out of line here. But management that is interested in protecting the shareholders or seeking the shareholders' benefit, especially when the cost of borrowed money is low, as it has been recently, they're more likely to do the leverage thing, as long as it doesn't get out of line. And that's that during our discussions in class and lectures and so forth, I think I've probably measured the trade-off between risk and reward. As we take more leverage, more debt, the risk goes up, and so leverage is a measure of financial risk, among other things. It's gotten pretty high. So your point is well taken. But with that greater risk has been the opportunity for greater reward. So this risk has been taken to make acquisitions, which hopefully will have a high rate of return or increase the rate of return going forward in the future. So management decides, all right, we'll take the risk in order, hopefully, to get a higher reward in the future from that investment. And one way you can get capital to risk is not necessarily by borrowing it. You can issue stock to do it. But then you've got more shareholders that are looking to you to increase their wealth. And the shareholders that existed before you sold those shares of stock, they may have a different point of view than the shareholders that exist, the new shareholders have. And so that's the trade-off that you have in the financing of these things. Is that okay for me to change the slide here?
Oh, yes, sir. Thank you. Next, we're going to move into the critical success factor report card. And the critical success factors that are listed there on the left of this chart or report card came from the functional capabilities, which came from our strengths list from, I think it was 2 or 3 slides back. So it's evident by looking at this report card that John Deere outperforms their competitors such as Case New Holland and AGCO, especially in the functional capabilities that we have listed here, which are the technology, research and development, metallurgy, and sales and distribution network. And then just to clarify, we gave John Deere a 4.0, Case New Holland a 3.0, and AGCO a 2.57. And then next is the goal section, and I believe Meredith is going to begin on that aspect.
Meredith?
I'm talking with the mute button on. Good Lord.
Is it Meredith's turn?
It's my turn. You can hit the next slide. Okay, so this is another overview of our financial spreadsheet. If you look over to the right, that's where we have put in what our predictions are for 2021. And all this information was gathered through Value Line. But I will say that when we looked at this slide, or we looked at those financial numbers that they had listed, we felt that they were a little too timid. So we did increase those because we felt that in between that 2012 and that 2013 peak that they had, that was due to their commodity prices, their cash receipts, all that great stuff. We felt like, okay, that's going to start back up again. Okay, especially with our products, all the things that we're going to be doing out in our global market with some mass urbanization, the population growing. There's going to be a lot of demand out there. So we did change that up a little bit to be more aggressive. So with you can flip to the next slide, Dr. Roney. Okay. With our sales, you can see where that's going to be heading up there. We went about 27% increase on that. That was going to be due to all the mergers and acquisitions that we did to increase the sales, especially out in our global market. But really, the forecasts in the next 5 years are very optimistic for the company as markets are remaining stable, demand for construction, like I talked about before, agriculture and consumer goods are increasing. The company is poised to capitalize on any future upturn in its markets, long-term to benefit from macro economic trends that hold great promise for the future. And that talks about that mass urbanization, people moving into the city areas, which we need infrastructure and the construction portions of John Deere to help us out with that. So we're going to increase our margins, and hopefully with our efficiency and innovations, we're going to increase operating profit margins greater than our expenses. Our growth rate for our return on equity is going to be great, as well as our measurement of productivity for invested capital will be trending upward. So if you'll flip to the next slide.
Okay, let's remember now that, this is just context, but goals are standards for success, right? These are success standards. So it's nice that we say that they are going to, and we think that there's reason to believe that they will. But this is what you guys believe. If DEERE accomplishes, the company will be successful, competitively, financially, so forth. And they certainly would be. If you look at the operating margin, the way it's been trending, you got a very nice reversal going on there. We just want it to come true.
Okay, and then for, let me get to that slide. And then for, we're going to see an increase in invested capital as profits increase and debt stays static. But also our, sorry, my computer's rocking a little bit. There was some mergers and acquisitions, specifically the one in 2017 around the Blue River Technology acquisition that is really going to put us for long-term growth with our ag precision and data analytics, data management, to help our farmers be more efficient, as well as construction people as well too. So that was a big thing for the company. So we're probably gonna see, even though we have leverage going down and we have debt kind of staying static, we're probably gonna see that leverage probably go up as we seek mergers and acquisitions, to help with our growth and expansion in our global markets to increase that. One other thing to think about in that 2017, which closed, I'm not sure when, but the Burton Group. No, excuse me. How do you say it? Burton?
Yeah, you got it.
Burton Group. Okay, so that was another big merger that just occurred.
Right.
So we're going to see some increase in our construction sector and everything. So that leverage probably might go up, but we're hoping it kind of goes down a little bit. But
well, I think you got the idea that the long-term debt, frankly, could come down even a little bit more, assuming that no new acquisitions of great size are undertaken. If there are more acquisitions, there may be more debt. But what we've got is a very gradual reduction of debt, meaning that there's probably more debt for working capital and operating purposes, replacement of machinery and equipment rather than buying new companies or even building new factories, which of course is possible. Mm-hmm. But we've got it's almost flat, and yet we see shareholder equity going up pretty dramatically, and consequently leverage coming down as a debt as a proportion of capital. And I'm also I'm always skeptical when I see profit margin projections go up quite this rapidly. But one of the things that you mentioned, but maybe didn't quite linger on, is the acquisition of these software companies. The nice thing about software is that the cost of goods sold is pretty low. When you sell a piece of software, you don't have to incur a whole lot of material cost and labor and overhead costs like you do when you're making a loader or a combine or a piece of heavy machinery. And so you usually generate a real high profit margin on those products. And to the extent that those new products that have been acquired become more important in John Deere's product mix, it's just possible that the profit margin will come up pretty substantially. So although these are remarkable graphs, they're certainly not indefensible. Okay, do you want me to keep flipping?
Yep, if you'll flip to the next slide, and these are just some conclusions. We're going to go more aggressive on our financial trends for 2017 to 2021 as the company will continue to grow at a steady rate. Sales along with operating profit margin, ROI, ROE, are expected to increase due to macroeconomic trends, including increased population growth is expected to climb and movement shifts to urban areas. Decreases in long-term debt and leverage are planned. However, they may increase somewhat with acquiring and merging with other companies to support their growth, i.e. the acquirement of Blue River Technology. And then the global economic factors will help John Deere's achieve expansion, which is, like we said before, the population growth in agriculture, global construction, and infrastructure needs, mass urbanization. Okay, so from this point on, I just want to kind of throw this out there. We're probably going to be tag teaming as a team because there was a lot of collaboration as we get to like our goals hierarchy piece of it. So we might all be chiming in and everything. So hopefully that doesn't, we had a lot of collaboration. So it was great to have a group perspective on it. But when we look at our goals hierarchy and where we see certain sectors to achieve, we have construction and forestry and lawn, as well as field and water management in the favorable market position. And this is going to be talking about those areas in India, in China, and then we did throw in there, and you're going to see this later, Africa, but that's really not anywhere that we have a market in, but somewhere that we're going to be seeking growth in. But we thought those were a really good place to put that goal, is that favorable market position. We've already gone ahead and gone up the acceptable risk and superior financial results, and now we're just going to stay where the favorable market position is.
A real quick one, Meredith, for people who are watching this recording. When we say that DEERE is at this position of favorable market position, those are the category of goals that DEERE is now seeking. It's not that DEERE has a sufficient market position. Okay, when a company is at one of the levels on this hierarchy, it means that that's where the priority, not the exclusive, goal-setting activity has to be, but the priority. So what in where these two arrows are pointing, it means we'd like to have a more favorable market position. We're satisfied. We think financially things are all right. We're always looking for more higher financial results. But what we'd like to do is emphasize competition here to essentially have higher market shares.
Dr. Roney, because John Deere's half and half domestic and half global, we have them in one market. We're looking to move them into the international market. Mm-hmm. And it followed off of a process where we took a look at our goals hierarchy, based them off of a simple model. We start with a nearby plant or dealership in an emerging market. We sell lumber machinery to clear the land and dozers and equipment to build the infrastructure. Agriculture equipment comes in behind it to grow food and to feed the population living in houses that were built with the construction equipment.
Right. We've talked
nearby.
about,
and then followed by the mowing and grass and irrigation with with lawnmowers and irrigation systems sold at the same dealership. So we toss the dealership out there, and then these things start to flow right behind it. So we're talking about moving.
That's the development process, and you're certainly correct in that process. But that's really not quite the same as saying favorable market position, where we're basically talking about where DEERE stands compared to its competitors in these segments of the business that are represented in the arrows. And I didn't expect this to become a conversation. I simply wanted to point out in my remark that some people misinterpret this hierarchy. They think that when a company is at the favorable market position, that means they already have one. And what we're saying is that in construction or forestry, in construction, DEERE's not the leader. In forestry, they're the leader, but there are lots of competitors in that industry, whereas there aren't many competitors in the construction equipment industry. So DEERE is not in the position of seeking long-term growth here. That is to diversify and move into what would be the subsequent versions of machinery that would do what machines are doing now in those fields. Instead, it's basically trying to get a stronger market position, a higher market share. The same is true in the field and water management stuff. But when we get into agriculture and turf, they're the 10,000-pound gorilla. Granted that when new golf courses and new farms are developed in Africa, by way of example, yeah, the construction will happen before we make of roads and stuff before we start making golf courses. But even in Africa and Asia and India, if you take a look at the industry, you will find other manufacturers of this machinery in those locations. They're just like DEERE is trying to get in on the ground floor. So the development sequence, the economic development sequence is always there. You're correct, but it doesn't contradict the desirability of success criteria. And in the case of these two lower arrows, the kind of success that DEERE is looking for is competitive. A little bit lower, the kind of success that DEERE or a company would be looking for would be financial, because they don't have sufficient financial results to provide the ammunition, enough wherewithal to seek competitive success. But when you get it all, like DEERE has in agriculture, now we're asking, where do you go from here? That's a much harder question to answer than at the prior two levels. It's pretty clear cut what you have to do to get a more superior or a more satisfactory financial result. And it's also generally pretty clear cut when you're pursuing a favorable market position. But once you're at the position where DEERE is in agriculture, what do you do for an encore? Now the good news is that agriculture has got a long term, and it's going to continue to grow. So frankly, the answer with DEERE and is probably continue to just beat the competition, be efficient, generate high quality, be innovative. But we're going to keep making agriculture equipment. It's not like we're going to try to diversify into something else. But in fact, what has DEERE done? It has diversified, hasn't it? Mm-hmm. What has it diversified into? Highway equipment. Highway equipment, right?
Yeah, just with that recent.
With the Burton Group.
With the Burton Group, right. Okay, that was a long break. I'm sorry about that, but it's really important. It's sort of fundamental to the course.
Well, and just to touch on too, what we have at the top of our goals hierarchy as far as long-term growth, DEERE is specifically focused on the precision ag market as a means for growth. So DEERE's end goal is to be the undisputed leader in technology as it relates to precision ag. So DEERE believes that precision ag is going to shape the future of agriculture, which is why they're pursuing this market so aggressively. So that's why we have that at the very top, because ultimately this is DEERE's end goal.
Great point. Really a great point.
Okay, so with this slide here, this is really talking about our 4 building blocks of competitive advantage. And it's used to explain our generic approach to sustaining the competitive advantage over here. So we're looking at quality over there. We're going to be talking about automation and how John Deere has been seeking, products that are driverless. You've got connected smart systems. You've got some really cool stuff on the way in John Deere's world, including the data analytics part that talks about the quality focus, as well as GPS systems that can provide reports and status real time. So we thought that was a great quality for our consumers and our investors. and the people that buy our products. Customer responsiveness, we've got deep end use understanding, also dealer user support. We've got a very robust finance sector, as well as world-class distribution systems. I mean, we've talked about all the 7 new manufacturing parts and plants. We've got places out in Brazil and France and Russia, and it's pretty global. And also to focus on our irrigation. And the big part about that irrigation piece is that, water usage consumption is going to be going up, way up, but the water shortage is there, and it's going to even get worse. So in parts that we're thinking about doing, agriculture with arable land, we're going to have to think about irrigation and how we're providing water and coming up with some new innovative out of the box thinking to that. So we've got some things in our slides that will help explain that a little bit. As far as our efficiency, I'm going to turn that over to Eric. I know he had a lot for that one. So.
As far as the efficiency goes, for helping it create the competitive advantage, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but specifically to put a name on it, John Deere Electronic Solutions embodies a lean manufacturing philosophy. The processes are highly automated. The pictures were out of this world. Most of them were robotic. It's an automated process that they use to build some of these pieces of machinery. It allows it to manage its cost and have a consistent operation with some of the highest reliability and quality coming off the end of the assembly line. Promotes better production controls to eliminate waste and increase profitability. It's metrics driven with manufacturing floor systems designed to monitor and track the quality. So early detection of potential quality issues is almost immediate. And again, that's under just the efficiency on the manufacturing side of it. As far as big data for farmers, sensors are added to the equipment, helps farmers manage their fleet to decrease downtime of their tractors as well as save on fuel. Information is combined with historical and real-time weather data, soil conditions, crop features, and many other data sets. And wait till you see what this thing does. Platform, the myjohndeere.com platform can be used on an iPad, iPhone app. It's a mobile farm manager. Morgan alluded to it a little earlier. In order to help farmers figure out what crops to plant, where, when and where to plow, where the best return will be made with the crops, and even which path to follow when plowing. Some metadata is being stored in sales and dealership operations to indicate proper stock levels and anticipate seasonal demand and provide possible product suggestions to better fit needs of the ag, forestry, and construction customers. And then you move on into their Amazon-like warehouses are being planned with decreased delivery times to farmers for parts. So the distribution system, all of it, all that stuff, increasing the efficiency, automated, they're definitely going to have some competitive advantage to continue to build on. Not to mention the plant capacities currently are not operating at full capacity. They have the expansion to build once they start seeing the increase in sales.
And to move on to innovation, that's a really big one to them, as I talked about. It's very critical to competitive advantage. But the big thing is the research and development they do to build those innovative, super efficient, high quality products. They invest so much money in. So that's a big one with their innovation and how they're going to continue to grow and be the top dog in each of their markets. But also growing extraordinary global talent, your leadership piece of it, and then focused on new products that change the way John Deere does business. And we'll get into that more because I foresee John Deere with the way we're talking and the way technology is really just pushing forward, that we're going to be seeing a lot of out of the box thinking with that and the way they have their products and stuff. Futuristic, very futuristic.
Okay.
As far as strategy, coming up on this, opportunities multiply as they are seized, and that's what John Deere's doing. Even in downturn, they're seizing those opportunities. So we can flip to the next slide. We talk about the strategy in the construction and forestry and lawn. They're going to continue to pursue an aggressive global strategy, combining market penetration with key dealership additions, to foster domestic partnerships that demonstrate commitment to the U.S. economy through aggressive marketing and sustainability initiatives. This is where you get into the wow, the book is right behind me. Conscious capitalism.
Oh.
By working with environmental groups instead of against them, maybe we won't run into these problems where we can't plow a field again because it's got a puddle in the middle of it in the future. Also, fostering some more domestic partnerships. We're talking about working with some of the water restoration or the cleaning up of the water that's going on down in Texas. That is an unregulated market. Texas is helping with research and development as well as funds for reverse osmosis plants to take brackish water that's found throughout the inland parts of Texas, not just the salt water on the coast. And it's one of the more emerging markets for water purification. So focus on acquisitions, adding innovative technologies that will help John Deere through product development, enhancing their current research and development, and that's what they're going to focus on. Again, we get into the strategy of field and water management. This is a huge part of John Deere's future. Develop marketing campaigns, first off, concerning their stock dividends. You don't want to lose the investors from the stock that based off of the gains that you've gained over the time with the sales and the discipline. You want to maintain those investors and their interest in holding on to their stock. Dividends will remain flat until sales and earnings have sufficiently increased due to increased acquisition of water resources and irrigation and reverse osmosis development. But with that rise in the stock market right now, I'm not sure you can find anybody that's willing to sell. Develop an international water management division. Base it in Texas, like I said before, for research and development and product development, and then send it on out into your existing dealership networks globally and begin to market those products in those developing areas. Next slide. There we go. This was some of the out-of-box thinking that we were talking about. We'll start at the bottom, the more obvious. Automation, driverless equipment, finding companies to work with through joint ventures can lead us to some better products that we can use for driverless equipment. The drones have a ability to increase crop monitoring with aerial photography, and it also has, like that drone down there on the bottom, spraying chemicals, applications just exactly where it's needed. So you have precise application of costly chemicals that are trying to stop the spread of disease in a field instead of waiting till the end and then having the harvest and saying, oh, geez, couldn't get in there. And another thing we talked about was the utilization of the dealer network for a possibility of a Uber for tractors and dozers like idea. Would be developing applications that allow operators and to the ability to connect with owners for short-term use of their equipment, using that dealer network, being able to offer another financial type product with John Deere through its dealer network. And again, that's all without any cost of goods sold right there, but you're able to profit from that process.
Okay, so now we get into the Ansoff matrix, and really the Ansoff matrix is really a communication tool which can help you see possible growth strategies for the organizations such as John Deere. So we'll start in the top left, which is our market penetration. So when we go back to the goals hierarchy, that was one of our market favorable positions. So we're looking at increased construction and forestry segment in key geographic areas. And the key to that is going to be your dealership positions and where those are located at, that consumers can get to those for that market favorable market position on that.
And executing the alliance with the existing dealers, right? To support those dealers in every way possible.
That's right. And then if you look at the product development, and we talked about connected smart systems. So we already have precision ag, which talks about data analytics and the computer systems that's in there. But what about your connected smart systems? Like, how does that all connect together in like the big web of all that? So we thought, seeking more connected smart systems for the farmers, anybody, those end users, anything that would help make it more efficient for them. Then we looked at Africa, and Africa has arable land. And so the little arrow pointing right there, we talk about desalination and irrigation because, we think about the water shortage and things like that. And desalination really is pulling out ocean water or any salt water or whatever, and you strip that of all the minerals and or really just the salt in there. So that could be a very good water source. Looking at more development in our irrigation, and then the construction and forestry equipment. So working with that Verton group to develop, new and improved construction, not only just for forestry, but also infrastructure and highway. Eric, did you want to talk about biodiesel engines? I know that was a big thing for you.
Yes.
I put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you did, because I think that's actually biodiesel was coming up in competency.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Thanks, Meredith.
I know, man. Okay.
It's a great transition, though, Meredith, because
Yeah, because we're about to go right to the next slide on that.
Not yet, because this is where we picked up on some of the extremely interesting pieces where we're blending competencies with future growth, with unrelated, diversified management team. When you take a look at the members that are on the management team that are in these different areas, some of their backgrounds are extremely exciting. It begins with the corporate structure and senior management possessing core competencies and blending their knowledge with the current John Deere operations, very similar to acquiring new forms of technology along with your research and development team. The board has senior management with experience. Two of the individuals are from Allied Signal, a company formed from Honeywell acquisition that includes aerospace, automotive, and engineering, and advanced polymers. That's two of your board members have that knowledge to go along with your steel knowledge. One of them's from BMW, small diesel engines and advanced auto heads-up display technologies as well as geopositioning for automobiles. Their heads-up display on their 7 Series is off the chart. I'm pretty certain that Morgan would love to see that type of thing on the inside of her tractor. Two of them are from Chase Bank. They got strong financial backgrounds. One of them's from AT&T, and everybody knows everything's better with Bluetooth. So it's just that core competency starting from the top with those type of managers. You're envisioning your future for John Deere through your Ansoff matrix. They got a strong start with it.
Are
Okay,
we
so-
talking about product development here, product
Market-
proliferation? Where are your remarks aimed here, Eric?
Market penetration, sir.
Market penetration.
Where you're
A great
taking
deal
your
of what you were talking about was the development of new capabilities to develop new products and maybe even product proliferation. You know, there's a model that comments like yours are made for. I don't know whether you've got it in here and you're going to show it to us later, but it's that competences model. Do you remember that one? Like Premier plus 10, fill in the
Yeah.
blanks. Yeah, you know.
We've got that later on.
we have
You-
that.
Okay, that's where I would have expected Eric to make those remarks.
Yep. So we'll go ahead and finish this one. So for
Yeah.
market development, we've got field and water management in India, which is a big one. We've got dealer relationships in India, infrastructure, agriculture development in China, and infrastructure and agriculture for northern Brazil. For product proliferation, so this is the new, all the good new stuff, and we're looking at sustainable energy products, making things more electric, maybe electric-powered tractor, and then seek automation with driverless tractor movements. There is a little bit of that now, but we seek to further expand on that. And then John Deere Rental and Farm Services, which is the Uber for John Deere that Eric was talking about.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so here, just to start in the top left with the stars. So these are products in high growth markets with high market share. So obviously the ag equipment and John Deere Financial Services are both stars because they're market leaders, but they still are going to require ongoing investments to sustain. So earnings here are stable and they're stable and growing. So investing in these segments is still important for continued growth of these segments. As far as the cows, these are products in lower growth markets, but they still have a pretty high market share. And John Deere falls short of its competition for or in the market for the construction equipment and forestry equipment here, just because the new opportunities for increased demand for construction equipment, and Deere is increasing their spending in the construction segment because they're seeking to gain more market share here. An example would be in 2013 and 2014, Deere opened 2 factories in Brazil and 1 in India. And then as the market for construction equipment continues to grow worldwide, Deere is aiming to beat its competitors to new markets. And the acquisition of the working group shows how Deere is trying to grow and expand and strengthen this segment. As far as the ventures, these are products in high growth markets with low market share right now. So irrigation, water management and irrigation are important. They're very important in the ag industry. Deere is trying to grow in this market. Efficient irrigation systems and water management practices can help farm profitability in an era of increasingly limited and costly water supplies. Irrigation, and specifically as it relates to precision ag, is becoming a major deal in the market. And Deere is moving very quickly in this segment, just as they are with precision ag technologies. And I think Eric was going to add on the biodiesel. This is kind of his specialty.
Biodiesel, all John Deere diesel engines can run on biodiesel. Biodiesel is a renewable oxygenated fuel made from soybeans and rapeseeds. One of the primary advantages of biodiesel is that it's completely renewable. It's also non-toxic, it's biodegradable, and suitable for sensitive environments such as construction sites around pristine water sources. I thought biodiesel was a blend. It can be a blend, but biodiesel contains, by definition, it contains no petroleum, even though it can be blended at any level,
Right.
With petroleum diesel to create a biodiesel blend. The pure biodiesel is B100, And that is an item that every single one of John Deere's diesel engines can operate on.
Yeah. The engine, as I understand it, needs to be capable of being tuned to accommodate this this fuel, because I'm not conversant with the technology, but I guess it's a different octane. You know, it simply burns faster or slower. You know, it doesn't burn like gasoline.
It burns with less compression, so it does have to be tuned.
Yeah.
But that's what the reason for the blend is. If you blend into a B88 or a B80, you've got 80% biodiesel and you've got 20% petroleum. Then you can have a little bit. Some of those things don't set off all your engine warning lights.
Yeah.
But if anybody's got one of those flex fuel vehicles and you pull in and you put in that cheaper fuel, first thing that's going to happen when you start driving down the roads, the engine light comes on. But it still is able to run. It just needs to be tuned up a little bit. But John Deere does have that ability. And if the farmer or the construction decided that they wanted to go all green with renewable energy, they have that opportunity. Their technicians will come out there, work on the engine for a few minutes, and off you're running. No petroleum products at all.
Just one cosmetic item, and that is we've got a great big circle here for biodiesel. It's actually bigger than the circle for diesel engines. Diesel engines is a big part of Deere's business. It's a big contributor. What we usually see in ventures here are smaller circles, just because these are businesses in the embryonic or early growth stages of the life cycle. So in case anybody is looking at this for the first time, we're not saying that biodiesel is almost as big as John Deere Finance, are we?
No. And it should be smaller. I think that might have just happened from the font size.
What I usually do is I make a small circle and then I put a little box outside it and with an arrow or something pointing to it.
Okay.
Okay. Boy, it's late. We better keep moving here.
Okay, so this is Nancy again, and I won't elaborate too much on this slide. This is the country growth matrix. I think this has been reiterated a number of times this evening. But you can see that John Deere's heavy in USA and North America, and that's where a majority of their business is, but it's very slow growth. It's plateauing out. And the growth is in China right now, but it's also seems to be waning a little bit. And the up-and-comers are countries such as India, South America, mostly Brazil. We could put additional small circles for places like Russia, and maybe even a tiny one for Africa in the ventures for the water sources.
Yeah, I'm glad you have this matrix for geographic markets, and I think it does point out that North America and the classic businesses are cash cows, and that the growth and where we're going to have to take the arrow. I don't know if you can see my cursor here, but this box with the dollar signs in it is supposed to indicate that there's an arrow leading from these cash cows, and maybe an arrow pointing up here. But the money that's the cash flow that's thrown off of these businesses down in the lower left-hand quadrant, it's being sent up to the venture category to support the growth of those businesses. And once again, India isn't as big a business as some of these others down below are, but it sure has the potential of being. So we've got an arrow that points over saying we want India to become a star like China. And rather interestingly, and again, I've taken time, but what will happen when India gets over to where China is that China will begin to work its way down where the USA is. And so very often when I used to work with clients on this thing, I tried to get them to develop what we call a cash pump. And what we wanted to have was a star. We wanted to have a cash cow. We wanted to have some ventures. And then we tried to keep things moving over the long term so that the ventures, some of them, most of the ventures, by the way, fall down to the bow wow category. They don't if they're countries, if they're geographic areas, but they do if they're products. But what will happen is that India will become hopefully a star. China, as it matures, will become one of these cash cows. And then perhaps South America will be the next venture, and then perhaps countries in Africa.
Okay, we can go to the next slide probably.
Okay.
All right, so in terms of a strategy, we chose a global standardization strategy because as competitors emerge, and they have emerged already, international and localization strategies are less effective. And so global standardization focuses on increasing profitability by benefiting from economies of scale, of course, and location economies, choosing specific areas, those places that are optimal for profitability. And we'll show that when we talk organizational structure.
Okay, for our competencies. Okay, so Premier plus 10. So this is what new competencies DEERE needs to build and protect and extend into their current industries. Application engineering for developing nations. This just means research and development and developing products that serve developing nations. Foreign legal regulation expertise. Here, regulations are different when you're operating in different countries rather than the U.S. And so DEERE needs to understand and have expertise operating in different countries based on their regulations. And then fill in. So this is what opportunity does DEERE have to improve their position in existing markets by better leveraging their existing competencies. So end-use industry expertise. It's important to understand end-to-end characteristics and solutions for customers. Financing capacity, access to credit, and being a knowledgeable credit supplier is important to customers because many rely on financing in order to operate their businesses. And then new machinery and equipment manufacturing facilities. DEERE must continue to establish these facilities that help with the distribution process and enable an efficient production process. And then product line engineering and total quality management. DEERE must continue to innovate and create products that are useful and beneficial to customers, and these have to be quality products. And then I'm going to turn it over to Eric here for the mega ops and power generator equipment.
Dr. Roney, you can just cut and paste my last comment.
Okay.
The mega ops, we're talking new core competencies to build and participate in the most exciting markets of the future. So we're looking at mining equipment. John Deere obviously is lags behind Caterpillar. However, with the recent deregulation and opening up of federal lands that just happened this past week, along with the changes in the mining regulations, is allowing a lot of that protected acreage out west to begin to be able to spur growth. One of the things I was amazed when I lived in Wyoming was if you looked at Wyoming and as a comparison of public versus private held property, the entire state of Wyoming looked like a checkerboard. And basically what it was every other little square was owned by the federal government. That cuts out mining, that cuts out a lot of those things. And yet, when you take a look at one of the biggest industries out there besides cattle in Wyoming is mining. So is the deregulation opens up and you're allowed to move in there, John Deere has a huge opportunity to expand its operations. The one biggest drawback with the mining issue is there's been such a cutback in mining operations over the past 8 years, that there's a lot of used equipment out there. So the potential with the mining equipment would be to bring in a lot of that driverless technology, a lot of that GPS technology, and some of the other pieces of the technology, and put it into some of your mining equipment. And you've got the potential for a huge new market, new pieces of equipment out there. Halophytes. We discussed that a couple of times in conversations building up to this final presentation. There are many systems that are out there that use adapted harvesters to bring in aquaculture and harvesting of things like halophytes. Harvesting halophytes using John Deere specifically designed, made, and manufactured equipment would be a great opportunity for John Deere to get involved. 70% of the wheat that's produced in the United States or around the globe is used to feed livestock. If you use the halophytes in a mixture with the feed, you're able to feed the livestock with less wheat, allowing more wheat to be able to be utilized in the feeding of the human population. And as that human population grows, they usually transition from wanting to eat bread to wanting to eat bread with a meat patty in it. So getting involved in building specific equipment that's going to help with the harvesting of halophytes and other forms of aquaculture will be another mega opportunity for John Deere. And the desalination with the drying up of the surface water, as well as the use of the aquifers that exist right now, such as the one, I can't remember the name of the aquifer that runs right through the center of the United States. They're finding that, like I said before, in Texas, there's a lot of brackish water that's left behind. Using reverse osmosis allows that water to be utilized and to be drank. Used in agriculture because it's removed a lot of the impurities out of there, like different minerals that are going to turn the soil more alkalytic and destroy your crops. So there's another opportunity for John Deere to take some of its engineering and research and development and plow that in. And biodiesel engineering, again, that just reiterate that and put that right in there in the mega op spot. The white space, we are talking with the white spaces. You're taking again, a new industry, but using some of your existing competencies. Tata makes a vehicle for India, for its military, that combines power generation with a reverse osmosis machine and puts it on a trailer or puts it on a back end of a truck, and then takes that truck and moves it into an area that delivers drinkable, potable water along with a stable source of power. The Israelis do the same thing with one of their vehicles, and the United States has a vehicle that's much smaller. But John Deere being able to utilize that stuff for mining operations, for oil exploration, that would be something that would take their generating units along with their water purification systems, making it into a package and creating a new product, so to speak. And again, with the related diversification, that's where you're bringing in that management team that has all those outside pieces, and putting that management team in place and starting from the top for John Deere and working its way down.
And basically continuing to get into emerging markets, as well as continue to innovate their cash cow markets also, as far as related diversification. And I think that does it for that slide.
Okay, and power generating equipment, which is used among other things in oil fields and construction projects and so forth. So that's a good one as well. For people who are looking at this video recording and are still with us, this has been a long one. The halophytes are the vegetation that grows in salt water along the coasts. It's more likely to be the harvestable versions are more likely to be found on the Pacific coast, but they're on both coasts. And the challenge for DEERE, of course, is to create a harvester that works underwater. And so it's a special kind of machinery, but certainly not out of the realm of possibility for a firm like DEERE with its engineering capabilities. Okay.
So this is just a strategy model that DEERE had on their page, and we just thought we'd put this in here just to briefly touch on it. It basically just shows how DEERE leverages their strengths and capabilities between each market segment to grow their businesses and to sustain. And basically they just global growth businesses, complementary businesses, and supporting businesses is kind of they all tie together to how they leverage their strengths and capabilities.
Good exhibit.
All right, we're moving into implementation, and you can go, yes, and this is the organizational structure. So since we chose the global standardization strategy, the most appropriate organizational structure is the worldwide product divisional structure. And here the headquarters, as you'll see directly under the CEO, maintains responsibility for the overall strategic development, the finance, sales, marketing, research and development. And we also added that international water management position that would be in the headquarters. And then we added, and this is just a snapshot of what it could be, those location economies underneath each of the divisions there. So ag and turf, we've got China, India, and Russia because they have the most arable land. Construction and forestry, and some of these places, they already exist. For example, they're in Brazil. They're already in the UK, specifically in Germany. But just go ahead and more concentrate on those specific areas in order to achieve profitability.
So we see this thing moving. Is it a matrix, Nancy? Does it become a matrix, or are these product divisions?
These are product divisions. Sorry, I had difficulty trying to smush it on the slide in some kind of coherent and clean way. So
okay, and so our textbook deals with this. Oh, wait, this may be the textbook from another course, one of my international courses. But when we avoid the matrix, and instead we've got a structure, a division structure that could be product focused or geographic focused, or could even be functionally focused. And we don't want to have a matrix. What we do is what's called a matrix overlay. And so instead of having executives responsible for China, India, Russia, Brazil, Africa, so forth, what we do is, and I think you've done it right here, is we put geographic responsibilities underneath the authority for, in this case, the product category. So agriculture breaks down in 3 geographic areas, but construction and forestry breaks down geographically, but differently. And so that's why I think you've done it the right way. A matrix would be real sloppy here. And so yes, we use this thing called the matrix overlay. It's you basically are creating in this case, the geographic responsibilities within each product group.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Now we still have the potential for a matrix, don't we? because we've got this international finance arm, and that's working for all the divisions, and we've got the sales and marketing. Presumably, they're having something to do with these divisions. It's kind of a question. And then you've got this thing all by itself, international water, and that's where I think you said you had trouble fitting it all in.
Yes.
But it's another one of those divisions, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, and since it's a new division, we don't have geographic subdivisions for it yet.
No, and our strategy was to keep it at the home office in the U.S. at this time.
Okay. Do I flip the slide?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, we're about ready to hit it home. I'm excited. So, conclusion. So, how does John Deere been faring in the Darwinian competition in the past 3 to 5 years? Is John Deere's been focusing and spending. Oh, I think I'm reading somebody else's part. Yeah.
No, it's fine, Nancy. We're just talking about the research and development and how much money they spend has led to better and efficient, high-quality products, which has helped them be very competitive in the past 3 to 5 years. Maybe not globally so much, but U.S. and Canada, man, they're skyrocketing. Maybe not in the construction and forestry, though.
But
Okay.
definitely in North America.
Yes, and that was my point, is that they're winning, especially in the United States and North American market in agriculture. But they run the threat, and it's a big problem, of losing out in those global markets by not having a big enough presence in places like China, India, Africa, etc.
And then we talk about survival of the fittest due to their vast product lines, irrigation and construction, which is complemented by their mergers and acquisitions.
Okay.
You can flip to the next one.
All right.
We're almost done, we promise.
All right. As conditions change in the external environment, what strategic shifts will be required in the future? What new capabilities will be critical? I think we touched on this a lot. Just kind of wrapping it up is the research and development and automated self-driving. I think one of us had touched on political influence in the in economics, which is so big. So no politics today. Finance division getting bigger. Water usage, that's steadily increasing while water is becoming a shortage. So, great opportunity for water and irrigation or field and water gate. I can't even talk now. It's getting so late. Sorry. And then seek expanded opportunities with desalination system and halophytes. And then seek invested capital internationally to increase growth in underdeveloped countries. With sub-Saharan Africa, Central Africa, including Kenya, Southern Nigeria, and then also our China and India. All right, so most important strategic objectives for the next 3 to 5 years, we've got research and development. We want to establish John Deere as a technology leader for ag and turf, which they're definitely headed that way. Construction and forestry, we've got a little ways to go with that, and field and water management, which will be a big focus. Try to establish location economies by global divisions, which Nancy harped on. Acquire companies both domestically and globally to create synergies and expand growth. Focus on growing the construction and forest division domestically. Develop more aggressive water resource and waste management, establish key leaders in emerging markets, and identify and develop the next CEO. What that succession plan looks like, because Samuel Allen looks like he's been there forever, and I think he probably still has a little while to go. I mean, I think he worked for the company starting in 1975. But just most recently in 2009 took over as CEO. So, he's probably getting to that age he might want to retire and enjoy life. And so need a very effective succession plan.
Yeah, the CEO terms these days are getting shorter. 7 to 9 years is the norm. But again, that's getting shorter. So that's a very important part of implementation for Deere. And I think somewhere along the line it's been published that the 2 division heads are acknowledged to be the potential successors, and so they're both kind of jockeying for that position. Problem is they've been jockeying for that position for a long time already. By the way, when Eric was talking about strategy, a lot of what he talked about was projects that, rather than the generic approaches or conceptual approaches, he got into real specific products and projects. And I think that if you took those items that he talked about and put them here in this category, they'd probably fit better. Because he got real specific, and of course that's what we do when in implementation. We talk about specific actions that are going to be taken to make the strategy happen.
Okay. All right, critical actions that will ensure implementation of John Deere strategy, mergers and acquisitions that can help with research expenditure as well and innovative products. Aggressively pursue the global strategy, invested capital to fund the new growth and everything, and then research and development. I think that's a huge part of what they do.
Yeah, and frankly, I don't know if I can get this one up, but your prior slide here, where you indicated that they were going to be the technology leader. Was it on the prior?
No, it's going to be on the slide that
the technology leader.
It's going to be on up. That, I think that was when we were talking about. I can't remember
which one that one is now. It's all written together.
That's it right there.
Right here. Okay. Yeah. When we get get it down here like this, I can edit it. And the only thing that I would want to do is put it in red or something. I don't know whether the thing will let me do that. Yeah, there we go. Or something that makes it stand out. But we're back to the question of market position. And, on the hierarchy, a more favorable market position, or to hold a favorable market position. R&D, of course, is part of the same complex of positions and actions to be taken. But clearly, John Deere doesn't want to be the least cost competitor, does it? It wants to be the technology leader. And so I just think that when you hit that one, Nancy, you hit the hot button.
Okay.
Are we
going to go to the last slide, yeah. And Meredith, take a break. You've been working hard enough. So the last little part there about being competitive.
One more slide, I think.
Oh, am I on the last one? Sorry, yeah.
No, it needs to be, no, he just needs to go to the next slide.
We need to go all the way to the last slide, yes.
118.
Yeah. Oh, there's another one? I'm sorry. Yeah. Oh, there's.
We just keep going.
Right there.
You fooled me. I thought that was it. Okay.
Okay, so how can they be competitive in 2020 and really beyond is that the U.S. and Canada will still be strong probably, but they need to look beyond. They need to look more globally. Clearly, we've talked about that a lot. The U.S. actually and worldwide, as I mentioned a while ago, about soil depleting in the next 60 years is that arable land is decreasing. So they need to look at ways and potential new markets of how to either maintain or increase the arable land. The differentiation of products, especially technology-based, will set John Deere apart from their competitors. It already does. And mergers with construction firms will help them strongly compete in the construction sector, such as highways and infrastructure projects, which is badly needed in the United States.
And of course, we have the Verton Group, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And we're done.
Oh, that's it?
Okay.
Oh my God.
Can I get a glass of wine now at 11 o'clock, or is that concerning?
No, not at all.
Let me see if I can bring us back together here for a short moment of conclusion. Good God. Where is the, there we go. Oh, stop sharing. It's so late that I'm groggy. Okay, there we are. My prayer is, oh, we are recording. Now when we got this thing back, I see the red button. I've been afraid the whole time that we weren't recording this thing. And for the people who are, and we've got Jana, Lakista, and Valerie. They're actually still here. My God, 3 people stayed the whole course.
I have to go. I have a team meeting with my group. So I just want to say good job. Y'all were very, very thorough. And we'll see you back here tomorrow, same time, same place.
Thank you.
Yeah, you guys
Good
present
luck,
next,
y'all.
right?
Y'all say, hey, my whole team is on Zoom on another conference. They all said y'all did great. So we've been listening to y'all as we've been working on our presentation.
Oh
so.
my golly, you've multitasked.
Yeah, so hold on. Yeah, I'm here. Here's my face. Hey, here's the team. Say hey, team. Okay, y'all get the point. Okay.
So,
Thank
oh,
y'all.
look, there's somebody in the background too.
Oh yeah, that's my daughter. Y'all somewhere. Okay, bye.
All right, goodbye. And for everybody else who has not been listening to this, they don't know that they're going to have to take quite a bit of time to attend this thing. This probably is going to set a record. I don't think I've ever recorded a session this long before. So the converting this first of all to a YouTube file, to a Zoom file. That then gets uploaded into YouTube. You guys are going to have me staying up pretty late tonight. Thank you very much for that.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to work on this project, sir.
Oh, do you? But do you really mean that?
Now
As much as you mean,
Or-
as much as your thank you means.
Oh, okay.
Stop recording or?
Do you want me to stop recording, or are there any questions? Valerie or Jana, do you have any questions or comments that you want to add? Do you have any questions, Jana or
I
Valerie?
enjoyed the presentation tonight, and it was very thorough, so I really enjoyed it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All
I
right.
don't have any questions either, but great job, you guys.
Okay.
Thank
In that case, yes, I will stop the recording and hope that we don't bust the YouTube software. So I am